Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. My name is Zoe. I'm 32. When I blinked at Kisatchie National Forest in Louisiana, the sky blinked back. I should have known better than to trust Derek's idea of a romantic getaway. My boyfriend had this way of selling disaster as adventure, wrapping his impulsiveness in enthusiasm until I couldn't tell the difference anymore. 3 years together, and I still hadn't learned to say no when that manic gleam entered his eyes. This time, it was an RV rental, a battered 1987 Winnebago that smelled like mildew and regret, and a 2-week escape into the pine forests of central Louisiana. "Think about it, Zoe," he'd said, spreading a crumpled map across our kitchen table. "No cell service, no obligations, just us and the trees. We can work on things. Things." That word had become our catch-all for everything we didn't want to name. The arguments that started over nothing and ended with slammed doors, the sex that had become mechanical, the way we'd stopped really looking at each other months ago. I'd caught him texting someone named Rachel 3 times in the past month. He swore it was a coworker. I wanted to believe him badly enough that I agreed to this trip. We left Portland on a Tuesday morning in late September, the RV groaning and shuddering down I-10 like a dying animal. Derek drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping restlessly against the doorframe. He'd been taking pills for his ADHD since college, but lately he'd been skipping doses, claiming they made him feel flat. I preferred flat to the alternative. This jittery, distracted version who couldn't sit still, who talked too fast and laughed too loud at nothing. "You're quiet," he said somewhere past Houston, "just thinking." About what? About Rachel. About how your smile doesn't reach your eyes anymore. About how I'm afraid we're already over, and this trip is just delaying the inevitable. "Nothing important," I said. The Kisatchie Hills wilderness stretches across 500,000 acres of longleaf pine and hardwood forest in central Louisiana. The ranger we met at the check-in station, a weathered woman named Carol with suspicious eyes, seemed less than thrilled about our plans to camp deep in the backcountry section. "You got experience with that rig?" she asked, nodding at our Winnebago. "Plenty," Derek lied smoothly. "We'd picked it up yesterday." Carol studied us for a long moment. "Stay on the marked roads. Some of the old logging trails aren't maintained. And if you hear anything strange at night—" "Like what?" I asked. She didn't answer, just handed us our permits and waved us through. We drove for another hour on increasingly primitive roads, pines pressing close on both sides until Derek declared he'd found our spot. A small clearing beside Saline Bayou, far enough from the main campgrounds that we wouldn't see another soul. The water ran dark as coffee, reflecting the canopy above in fragmented pieces. "Perfect," Derek said, killing the engine. The sudden silence felt thick, oppressive. I stepped out into humidity that wrapped around me like wet cloth. September in Louisiana still carried summer's weight. The air smelled of pine resin and rotting vegetation, a sweetness that bordered on decay. Through the trees, I could hear water moving sluggishly and insects creating a wall of white noise. "Help me level this thing," Derek called, already cranking the stabilizer jacks. We spent the next hour setting up camp, hooking up the generator, extending the awning, arranging our fold-out chairs in a semicircle around where we'd build a fire. The RV's interior was cramped but functional. A bed that folded down from the wall, a kitchenette with a 2-burner stove, a bathroom the size of an airplane lavatory. Everything was designed for temporary living, for people just passing through. I wondered if that's what we were to each other now. Temporary. The sun was sinking fast when Derek finally got the fire going. He'd brought whiskey, the expensive kind, and we passed the bottle back and forth as darkness pooled between the trees. "This is nice," he said. "Right, just us, no distractions." I wanted to ask about Rachel but swallowed the question with another mouthful of whiskey. It burned going down, settled warm in my stomach. "Yeah," I said. "Nice." That's when I looked up at the stars and blinked, and every single one disappeared. Not gradually, not like clouds drifting across, Just gone, all at once, as if someone had thrown a switch. The sky went from a field of brilliant pinpoints to absolute black in the span of my blink. I gasped, stumbling backward, and when I opened my eyes again, the stars had returned. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Derek was checking his phone, frowning at the no-service indicator. "See what?" "The stars. They just—" I blinked again deliberately. Gone. Open eyes. Back. "Derek, look up. Look at the sky and blink." He sighed but humored me, tilting his head back. I watched his expression change from indulgent amusement to confusion to something approaching fear. "What the fuck?" He blinked rapidly, over and over. "They keep disappearing. How is that? That's not possible." "I know." We stood there in the firelight, taking turns blinking, watching the universe vanish and reappear with each flutter of our eyelids. It should have been impossible. Physics didn't work that way. Light didn't work that way. "Maybe it's some kind of optical illusion," Derek said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Or those pills the ranger gave us for water purification. Maybe they're hallucinogenic. We haven't taken any pills." Right. He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture I knew too well. There has to be a logical explanation, but there wasn't, and we both knew it. We tried to sleep that night, crawling into the RV's cramped bed with the windows cranked open to combat the heat. The generator hummed outside, a comforting mechanical sound in all that organic silence. Derek's hand found mine in the dark. "It's probably nothing," he whispered. "Some atmospheric thing. We'll ask the ranger tomorrow." I squeezed his fingers, wanting to believe him, but every time I closed my eyes I could feel it. The sky going dark above us, the stars winking out like candles. And somewhere in the edge of sleep, I heard something else. A child's laughter, high and silvery, coming from the direction of the bayou. I woke to find Derek already up, standing outside in his boxers and hiking boots, staring at the sky. The sun was barely risen, casting everything in gray-blue half-light. "You didn't sleep," I said, joining him with a cup of instant coffee. "Couldn't." His eyes were red-rimmed, pupils dilated. "Zoe, I've been standing here for an hour, and every time I blink they disappear. Every single time. It's not stopping. I tested it myself. Sure enough, blink, darkness, open, stars fading in the growing dawn. It was like the universe was waiting behind my eyelids, deciding whether to exist." "We should leave," I said. "And go where? This is happening in our heads. It'll follow us. You don't know that, don't I?" He turned to me, and I saw fear naked on his face for the first time in 3 years. Derek, who'd laughed when his motorcycle crashed, who'd shrugged off his father's death with bourbon and poker, Derek was terrified. What if we can't trust our eyes anymore? What if reality is breaking down or something? That's ridiculous. Is it? We're standing here watching the laws of physics fail. What's ridiculous anymore? We spent the morning trying to rationalize it. Derek proposed theories involving retinal afterimages, neurological glitches, mass hysteria between two people. I suggested carbon monoxide from the RV, even though the levels checked fine. We were grasping, desperate for explanations that would let us sleep at night. Around noon, Derek decided to hike to the ranger station and ask about atmospheric phenomena in the area. I stayed behind, telling myself I was tired, but really, I just didn't want to walk through those woods feeling like I couldn't trust my own vision. He kissed my forehead, a gesture from earlier in our relationship when affection came easy, and disappeared down the trail with a backpack of water and granola bars. "I'll be back before dark," he called. I spent the afternoon reading a paperback thriller I'd brought, trying to ignore the oppressive silence of the forest. The insect noise from yesterday had vanished, leaving only the occasional creak of trees and the whisper of water. At some point, I dozed off in my camp chair, the book sliding from my fingers. I woke to darkness and Derek's hand on my shoulder. Except it wasn't Derek. The hand was too cold, the fingers too long. I jerked upright, spinning around, but there was no one there. The fire had burned down to embers. The sky was full dark, stars blazing, until I blinked, and they weren't. "Derek?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the trees. No answer. I checked my watch. 9:30. He'd been gone over 8 hours. The ranger station was maybe 6 miles away, an easy 3-hour round trip. Where the hell was he? I grabbed the flashlight from the RV and stood at the edge of our clearing, playing the beam down the trail. Nothing but trees and shadows and that awful pressing silence. "Derek," I shouted. "This isn't funny." From somewhere deep in the forest, a child laughed. My blood went cold. It was the same sound I'd heard last night, high and delighted, but wrong somehow. The notes held too long, the pitch not quite human. It echoed between the trees, impossible to pinpoint. I backed toward the RV, flashlight sweeping wildly. "Who's there?" The laughter came again, closer now, and this time I heard words beneath it, or something like words. A wet, slithering sound that might have been language once before it rotted. I scrambled into the RV and locked the door, heart hammering. Through the window I watched the clearing, but nothing moved in the firelight. Minutes crawled past. 10, 20, an hour. At midnight, Derek came back. I heard his footsteps first. The familiar rhythm of his gait and relief flooded through me. I threw open the door. "Jesus Christ, where have you—" He stood at the edge of the firelight, smiling. But it was wrong. His mouth stretched too wide, showing too many teeth, and his eyes didn't blink. Just stared, unmoving, pupils reflecting red in the firelight. "Hey, Zoe," he said. His voice was right, exactly right, but something in the cadence was off. "Sorry I'm late." "What happened to you?" "Nothing happened. I talked to Carol. She said the stars are fine. We're fine. Everything's fine." He took a step closer. Still that terrible smile. Still not blinking. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" Every instinct I had screamed danger. This wasn't Derek. This was something wearing him. Something using his voice and face like a mask. "Where were you really?" I asked, gripping the doorframe. "I told you. The ranger station. Another step." I could see his chest now, rising and falling, but the rhythm was wrong. Too slow, too deliberate. "You don't trust me anymore, do you? That's what this whole trip was about. You think I'm fucking Rachel." I flinched. We'd never said her name out loud before. "I'm not. I don't." "It's okay." His smile widened impossibly further, skin stretching at the corners. "I understand. You want to see the real me? Fine. Let me show you." He raised his hands to his face and started pulling. I slammed the door and locked it, pressing my back against the thin metal as something outside began to scream. Not Derek's voice anymore, but something ancient and furious. A sound that made my teeth ache. The RV shook as fists pounded against it, and through the window I saw him. It. Clawing at the door. Derek's face hanging in strips from something darker underneath. I don't know how long it lasted. 5 minutes, an hour. Time stopped meaning anything. I huddled on the bed with my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, and when I opened them the stars were gone, and when I closed them they came back and I couldn't stop blinking. Couldn't stop watching the universe flicker in and out of existence. Eventually, the screaming stopped. I waited until dawn to look outside. Derek was gone. No sign of him, no footprints, no blood. Just the empty clearing and the dead fire and the bayou running black and silent. I searched the RV for my phone, his phone, anything that could explain what happened. Found his backpack on the bed, the same one he'd taken on his hike, still full of water and granola bars. He never left, I realized. Or he left and came back and left again, or never existed, or existed too much. Reality was bending here, folding in on itself like origami. I should have run. That was the smart move, the survival move. But I couldn't leave him, whatever he'd become. 3 years together had to mean something, even if that something was obligation masquerading as love. I spent the day searching, followed the trail to where it forked, then forked again, then ended at a tree I swore I'd passed an hour ago. The forest was a maze, rearranging itself when I wasn't looking. Or maybe it stayed the same and my perceptions were failing. Hard to tell anymore. As the sun sank, I heard the children again. There were more of them now, their laughter echoing from every direction. I caught glimpses between the trees, small figures darting and dancing, but wrong, all wrong. Their movements too fluid, limbs bending at joints that shouldn't exist. And when they turned to look at me, their faces were smooth as eggs, featureless except for mouths full of needle teeth. I ran. Branches tore at my skin. Roots grabbed my ankles. The laughter followed, growing closer, and behind it I heard Derek's voice calling my name, but it was coming from everywhere at once, overlapping with itself in rounds like a terrible choir. Zo-o-o-e. Where are you going? Zo-o-o-e. I thought you loved me. Zo-o-o-e. I burst back into the clearing and straight into someone, arms wrapped around me, warm, solid, real. I screamed and fought until I heard her voice. Easy, easy, I've got you. You're okay. Carol, the ranger. She was in full uniform, flashlight in one hand, radio in the other. Behind her stood 2 other rangers, both men, both carrying rifles. We've been looking for you since yesterday, Carol said. Your boyfriend showed up at the station raving about stars disappearing. We tried to follow him back here, but he ran into the woods. Search and rescue's been out all night. That wasn't him, I gasped. Something's wrong with this place. The sky, the children in the woods. Something came back wearing his face. You're in shock. We need to get you out of here. No, you have to listen. One of the male rangers, his name tag said Williams, stepped forward. Ma'am, have you taken any substances? Mushrooms, peyote, anything like that? I'm not high. This place is wrong. Every time I blink, the stars disappear. Look, just look up and blink. They exchanged glances. The kind of glances people share when they're dealing with someone unstable. Carol's radio crackled. A voice came through, distorted with static. Found something. North Ridge near the old Bordelon site. You better come see this. We hiked through the dark forest, the rangers forming a protective triangle around me. I kept my eyes open as much as possible, terrified to blink, terrified of what the darkness behind my eyelids might bring. But exhaustion was taking its toll, and my eyes burned. When I couldn't help it anymore, I blinked. The stars vanished. But this time, when I opened my eyes, they didn't come back. The sky stayed black. Not night sky black, but void black, absence black. And in that darkness, something moved. Vast shapes that might have been clouds or might have been living things, sliding across the empty heavens. Do you see that? I whispered. Carol looked up. Her face went pale. Jesus Christ. Williams raised his rifle, aiming at the sky. What the hell is that? The shapes began to descend. We ran. The Rangers' professionalism crumbled as those massive, impossible things dropped toward us like falling continents. I could hear them now, a deep, subsonic thrumming that made my bones vibrate, made my thoughts scatter like startled birds. We crashed through underbrush, leaped over logs, William screaming into his radio for backup, Carol half dragging me when I stumbled. The second ranger, I never caught his name, looked back at the wrong moment. Something reached down from the empty sky, a tendril of darkness that moved like smoke and struck like lightning. He simply ceased to exist, his body unraveling into component atoms that glittered briefly before vanishing. We didn't stop running. The old Bordelon site turned out to be a clearing larger than ours, dominated by a crumbling concrete foundation and rusted machinery that might have been oil derricks once. And there, arranged in a careful circle around the foundation's edge, were bodies. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. Some fresh, some reduced to bones, all positioned facing inward with their arms spread wide. I recognized the clothes on the nearest one, a flannel shirt I'd gotten Derek for his birthday last year. He sat cross-legged, eyes open, not breathing. His chest had been opened from throat to navel, ribs spread like wings, and something had removed his heart. But he was smiling that same too-wide smile I'd seen on the thing that wore his face. They're all alive, Carol whispered, her voice breaking. Look at their eyes. They're alive. She was right. The eyes followed us as we moved, tracking our every step with terrible awareness. Trapped in dead bodies, watching, waiting. William's radio screamed static, and then a voice came through. Dozens of voices, hundreds, speaking in perfect unison. When you blink, we live. When you see, we die. So, we took your seeing. Now, we live forever. Above us, the sky opened. I can't describe what I saw in those moments. Language fails when confronted with something so fundamentally other, so alien to human comprehension that your brain simply refuses to process it. But I remember eyes, millions of them, billions, an infinite fractal of watching, blinking eyes that existed in the space between moments, in the dark that comes when you close your own eyes. They had always been there, I understood, living in that darkness, sustained by our momentary blindness. Every blink was a doorway. Every closed eye was a feeding ground. And here, in this place where reality was thin, they'd found a way through. Carol was screaming. Williams was firing his rifle at nothing, bullets disappearing into the void. The bodies in the circle began to stand, moving in jerky unison, mouths opening to release sounds that might have been laughter or weeping or both. I did the only thing I could think of. I stopped blinking. My eyes burned. Tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision, but I forced them open, staring at the emptiness above. And as I watched, refusing to blink, refusing to look away, the shapes began to recede. Slowly at first, then faster, pulling back like a tide going out. The stars returned. One by one, they appeared, tiny sparks of light pushing through the darkness. The thrumming sound faded. The bodies collapsed back into stillness, and Derek, his corpse sitting in that circle with his chest open to the sky, finally closed his eyes. I held my gaze as long as I could until my vision went white at the edges and consciousness threatened to slip away. Only then did I blink. The stars stayed. They found me 3 days later, wandering along Highway 119, 20 miles north of the campsite. Dehydrated, hallucinating. My eyes so bloodshot they looked like they were bleeding. I spent a week in Natchitoches Regional Medical Center, while doctors ran tests and psychiatrists asked gentle questions. They never found Derek's body. The search team scoured the area around the old Bordelon site but found only abandoned machinery and undisturbed earth. No circle of corpses. No evidence of anything I'd described. Carol confirmed the stars had disappeared when we blinked, but she claimed it was a mass hallucination, possibly from contaminated water or toxic spores from the forest. Williams backed her story. The unnamed third ranger, the one who'd vanished, officially died in a camping accident in an entirely different parish 3 months earlier. Everyone had explanations. Everyone wanted me to accept them. I was released with prescriptions for anxiety and psychosis and a referral to a trauma therapist. I sold my apartment in Portland and moved to Albuquerque, where the sky is big and empty and the trees don't press close. I got a job doing data entry, something mindless where I don't have to think. And every night I force myself to blink as little as possible, because I know the truth. I felt it in that clearing, in those moments when the void opened above me. We exist because we're observed, because the universe checks on us every time we close our eyes. But something else exists in the spaces between those checks, living in our blind spots, waiting. It's been 8 months. I barely sleep. My eyes are chronically dry, red-rimmed, aching. I've trained myself to blink one eye at a time when I can, keeping at least partial vision at all times. People at work think I'm developing a tic. My therapist wants to increase my medication, but sometimes, late at night, I'll close both eyes deliberately. Just for a moment, just to see. And every single time, the stars go out, and something in the darkness whispers my name. I tell myself I'm imagining it, that trauma has broken something in my brain, that I'm constructing false patterns from chaos. But then I remember Derek's smile, too wide, his chest open like wings. I remember Carol's face going pale as she looked up at the empty sky. I remember all those bodies, alive but not living, trapped in the space between. Most of all, I remember what the voices said through William's radio. When you blink, we live. So I try not to blink. I know I can't keep this up forever. Eventually, exhaustion will take me. Eventually, I'll sleep, and my eyes will close for hours instead of seconds, and whatever waited for me in the Kisachi darkness will find me again. But not tonight. Tonight, I sit by my window in Albuquerque and watch the stars and force my eyes to stay open. My vision blurs with tears. My eyelids twitch and spasm. The urge to blink is becoming unbearable, but I hold on, because the moment I blink, really blink, a long, restful closing of my eyes, they'll come for me. And next time, I won't wake up. I'll join Derek and all the others in that circle, chest open, heart gone, eyes watching forever as the things in the darkness feed on our seeing and our not seeing, on the terrible space between observation and oblivion. The doctors say I'm getting worse. My mother calls twice a week, begging me to check myself into a facility. My ex-roommate from Portland says I need to accept what happened and move on. But they don't understand. They can't understand. They're still blinking without fear, still closing their eyes and trusting the universe to be there when they open them again. They don't know how fragile that trust is, how easily reality can fold and break. I know better now. I came to Kisachi for quiet and learned what quiet costs. I came to save a relationship and watched it torn open like a sacrifice. I came believing in physics and light and the permanence of stars. Now I believe in nothing but the discipline of keeping my eyes open. It's almost dawn. Another night survived. My eyes burn like acid. My vision swims with exhaustion hallucinations. Shapes that might be real or might be brain chemistry misfiring. Doesn't matter. I'll make it to sunrise. I always do. But one day, I won't. One day, I'll blink, and the stars will go out, and this time they won't come back, and something with too many teeth and Derek's voice will step through the darkness and take what's left of me to whatever place those things call home. I just hope it's quick. I hope it's not like Derek, alive but empty, watching forever from a circle of corpses while something else wears your skin and walks through the world pretending to be human. The sun rises over Albuquerque, and I'm still here, still watching, still refusing to blink, but my eyes are so tired, so very, very tired, and the darkness is so patient. It can wait. It's been waiting forever after all, in that space between one blink and the next, in the dark that exists only when we stop looking. I used to be Zoe. I used to be 32. I used to believe I could tell the difference between what's real and what's not. Now I'm just someone who doesn't blink, sitting by a window in New Mexico, watching stars that disappear when I'm not looking. Now I'm just another person who went to the wrong woods and learned that some darkness doesn't need light to exist. It just needs you to close your eyes. Just once. Just for a moment. That's all it takes. Story 2. I'm Jack. I'm 34. The dirt road to Fish Lake National Forest ended at my own car. I realize how insane that sounds. Let me back up. 3 weeks ago, my girlfriend Maren and I decided we needed to escape Portland's relentless rain and the suffocating monotony of our tech jobs. We'd been together for 2 years, and lately things had felt strained. Not broken, just worn thin, like a sweater pulled at the threads. Maren suggested an RV trip, something spontaneous, adventurous. She'd always been the bold one between us, the one who pushed me out of my comfort zone. I was the planner, the worrier, the one who read reviews and checked weather forecasts obsessively. We rented a small RV, a boxy white thing that smelled faintly of mildew and someone else's vacation. Maren loved it immediately. She named it The Wanderer and hung cheap Christmas lights inside, which I thought was tacky but didn't say. I wanted this trip to work. I wanted us to work. Fish Lake National Forest in Utah seemed perfect, remote enough to feel like an escape, accessible enough that we wouldn't get lost. Famous for Pando, the massive quaking aspen colony that's supposedly thousands of years old, all connected by one root system. Maren was obsessed with the idea of it, this ancient organism pretending to be a forest. It's like us, she'd said, tracing her finger along the map. Separate, but connected. I'd smiled, but something about the comparison unsettled me. Were we connected anymore? Or just pretending? We left on a Thursday morning, driving through Idaho's monotonous stretches of sagebrush and into Utah's more dramatic terrain. Marin played indie folk music and sang along off-key. I drove, my hands tight on the wheel, watching the landscape shift from green to gold to the burnt orange of southern Utah. We arrived at Fish Lake in the late afternoon. The ranger station was closed, budget cuts according to a handwritten sign, so we picked up a trail map from a weathered box and headed deeper into the forest. The aspens were spectacular, their white bark like bone against the darkening sky. Leaves shimmered in the breeze, creating a sound like whispered conversations. "This is perfect," Marin breathed, pressing her face against the RV window. We found a dispersed camping spot off Forest Road 8018, a dirt path that wound between the aspens. The site was isolated. No other campers, no facilities, just us and the trees. Marin loved it. I felt the first prickle of unease. "Shouldn't we be closer to people?" I asked as I parked. "Jack, that's the whole point. To get away from people." She was right, of course. I was being paranoid. Still, as I set up our camp chairs and Marin started a fire, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The aspens pressed close on all sides, their trunks too numerous to count, all identical. It was disorienting. That first night was pleasant enough. We roasted hot dogs, drank cheap wine, and talked about everything except what we should have been talking about, why we felt so distant, whether this trip would fix anything or just delay the inevitable. The fire crackled, and above us, stars emerged in impossible numbers. "I'm going to explore a bit," Marin said suddenly, standing up. "Now? It's almost dark. Just around the RV. I want to see the aspens in twilight." She disappeared into the trees before I could protest. I sat by the fire, irritated and worried in equal measure. The aspens rustled around me, and in the failing light their white bark seemed to glow faintly, like phosphorescence. That's when I noticed it. The ground beneath my feet was moving. Not violently, just a subtle rise and fall, like the slow breathing of something enormous sleeping underneath. I pressed my hand flat against the dirt and felt it distinctly. In, out, a rhythmic pulse that shouldn't exist. I jerked my hand back and stood up, my heart hammering. The sensation was impossible. Ground didn't breathe. But as I stood there in the gathering darkness, I could feel it through my shoes, that steady, patient respiration. "Marin!" I called out, my voice too loud. She emerged from the trees, her face flushed. "What? Do you feel that?" "Feel what?" I pointed at the ground. "It's moving, breathing." Marin knelt down and placed her palm flat against the dirt. After a moment, she looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "Jack, there's nothing. The ground isn't moving." "But I felt—" "You're stressed. You've been stressed for months. That's why we're here, remember? To relax." She said it gently, but I heard the subtext. "You're being paranoid again. You're overthinking again. You're ruining this again." I sat back down, embarrassed, and told myself she was right. It was stress, fatigue, maybe too much wine on an empty stomach. The ground was solid and still. Of course it was. But as the fire died down and we retreated into the RV for the night, I swear I felt it again. That slow, steady breathing beneath us, as if we'd parked on the chest of something vast and patient. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Sunlight filtered through the aspens, dappling the RV's interior with golden light. Marin made coffee on our tiny propane stove, humming to herself. Everything felt normal, even pleasant. "Let's hike to Pando's Heart today," she suggested. The ranger map shows a trail. According to the map, Pando's Heart, the oldest, most central part of the route system, was about 3 miles from our camp. It seemed like a reasonable day hike. We set out mid-morning, following a narrow trail that wove through the aspens. The forest was beautiful, but oddly quiet. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals, just the constant whisper of leaves and that faint, inexplicable sensation beneath my feet with every step. I didn't mention it to Marin. About an hour in, we found the first cairn. It was maybe 3 feet tall, stones carefully stacked in a spiral pattern that looked deliberate, almost ceremonial. Marin circled it, fascinated. "Someone put a lot of effort into this," she said. I took a photo, though I wasn't sure why. Something about it felt wrong. Not the cairn itself, but its placement here, in the middle of nowhere, marking nothing. We continued hiking and found 2 more cairns within the next half-mile, each one slightly larger than the last. The third one had objects woven into it, strips of fabric, small bones, what looked like a child's plastic bracelet. "Okay, that's creepy," Marin admitted. "Should we turn back?" "No way. We're almost there." But we weren't almost there. The trail, which had been clear and well-marked, began to fade. The aspens pressed closer, and the ground became softer, almost spongy. With each step, I felt that breathing sensation more strongly, the earth rising and falling beneath me in a rhythm that was definitely, undeniably real. "Marin," I said, my voice tight. "Stop for a second." We both stood still. And there it was, unmistakable. The ground swelling upward slightly, then settling back down. A breath, then another. Marin's face went pale. "What the fuck? You feel it now? The ground it's breathing. How is the ground breathing?" We stood frozen, afraid to move, as the earth continued its slow respiration beneath us. Then Marin did something that surprised me. She knelt down and pressed her ear against the dirt. "Marin, don't... shh." She stayed like that for nearly a minute, her face pressed into the soil. When she finally lifted her head, her expression was strange, almost reverent. "I can hear it." "Hear what?" "Everything. It's all connected. The roots, the trees, the soil. It's all one thing, and it's aware." The way she said "aware" made my skin crawl. "We should go back," I said firmly. For a moment I thought she would argue, but then she nodded slowly. Yeah, okay." We turned around, but immediately I realized we had a problem. The trail we'd been following was gone. Not faded. Gone. As if it had never existed. The aspens looked identical in every direction, their white trunks creating a disorienting maze. "Which way did we come from?" Marin asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I pulled out my phone. No signal, which I'd expected, but I downloaded offline maps. Except when I opened the app, the map was blank, just a gray screen with our blue location dot floating in nothingness. "The GPS isn't working. Try the compass." I opened the compass app. The needle spun lazily, unable to find north. "Okay," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "We don't need technology. We just need to backtrack. We came from that direction." I pointed, though I wasn't at all certain. We started walking, and with every step the ground's breathing grew more pronounced. It was like walking on the belly of a sleeping giant, feeling its massive lungs expand and contract. After 20 minutes, we found one of the cairns again. At least, I thought it was one of the cairns we'd seen before, but this one had a fresh addition on top. Marin's red bandana, neatly folded. "That's mine," she whispered. But I didn't. I never took it off. She touched her neck. The bandana was still there, knotted around her throat. We stared at the duplicate on the cairn. "Someone's fucking with us," I said, my voice shaking. "There's no one out here, Jack." "Then how?" A sound interrupted me. Distant but clear. A child's laughter, high and bright, echoing through the aspens. It came from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing between the white trunks. We ran. I don't remember deciding to run. We just did. Crashing through the undergrowth, the breathing ground pulsing beneath our feet. Branches whipped at our faces. The laughter followed us, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, never getting closer or farther away. We burst into a small clearing and stopped, gasping. In the center of the clearing stood our RV. "Thank God," Marin sobbed. But something was wrong. I'd parked, facing north. I remembered that, specifically because Marin had joked about always having our morning coffee facing the sunrise. But now, the RV faced south, and the trees around it had grown closer, their roots buckled up through the dirt, some of them pressed against the RV's sides like fingers. Did we park here?" Marin asked. I didn't answer because I didn't know. The clearing looked right but felt wrong, as if someone had built a replica of our campsite and gotten the details almost, but not quite, correct. We approached the RV slowly. The door hung open, which I definitely hadn't left that way. Inside, everything appeared normal at first glance. Then I noticed the coffee mugs we'd left that morning were full again, steaming with fresh coffee. The eggs we'd cooked and eaten were back in their carton, unbroken. "Jack," Marin said quietly, "what's happening?" "I don't know." I checked my phone again. Still no signal, still no map. But the time was wrong. It read 9:47 a.m. We'd left at 10:30. We'd been hiking for at least 2 hours. The phone insisted we'd gone back in time. The ground beneath the RV shuddered, a deep inhalation that made the entire vehicle rock slightly. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now. We're driving out of here." Marin nodded, her face bloodless. I jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught. Relief flooded through me. I put the RV in reverse, but the vehicle didn't move. The tires spun uselessly. I tried forward. Same thing. It was as if the RV was stuck in mud, but when I looked outside, the ground appeared solid. Then I saw them. Roots. Thick white roots had grown up overnight, or over hour, or over whatever the fuck had happened, and wrapped around the axles, the wheels, the undercarriage. The RV was held fast by dozens of pale, pulsing roots that seemed to tighten as I watched. "No, no, no," I muttered, gunning the engine. The roots held firm. The RV rocked but didn't break free. "Jack, stop," Marin said. "You'll burn out the engine." She was right. I killed the engine and sat there, hands shaking on the wheel. Outside, the aspens swayed in a wind I couldn't feel. Their leaves whispered, and for just a moment, I could have sworn they were forming words. "Stay, stay, stay." "We walk out," Marin said. "Forget the RV. We walk back to the main road and get help." It was a reasonable plan. The main road couldn't be more than a mile or two away. We could walk that easily, even through rough terrain. We grabbed our backpacks, loaded them with water and supplies, and left the RV. The moment we stepped outside, the ground's breathing intensified. Deep, hungry inhalations that made the soil swell visibly beneath our feet. It was obscene, watching the earth rise and fall like a chest. We picked a direction and started walking. The aspens watched us with their dark knots that looked too much like eyes. Within minutes, we were lost again. The trees shifted, or we shifted, or space itself shifted. I couldn't tell anymore. Every direction looked the same. White trunks, golden leaves, that awful breathing ground. "We're going in circles," Marin said after an hour of walking. She was right. We'd passed the same cluster of 3 fallen aspens twice now. The forest was looping us back on ourselves, keeping us contained. "There has to be a way out," I said, but I was losing conviction. The breathing beneath us was constant now, almost deafening in its rhythm. With each inhalation, I felt a pull, as if the ground wanted to draw us down into it. That's when Marin collapsed. One moment, she was walking beside me. The next, she crumpled to the ground, her hands pressed against the dirt. "Marin!" I tried to pull her up, but she resisted, her fingers digging into the soil. "Can you hear it, Jack?" she whispered. "It's talking. It's been talking this whole time. There's nothing talking. We need to move. It says we're trespassing. We're walking on its body and we never asked permission." Her eyes were unfocused, staring at nothing. Dirt caked her fingernails where she'd been clawing at the ground. "It says," she continued, her voice dreamy, "it says there's only one way to leave. We have to give something back. Marin, you're not making sense. Get up. It wants something living, something that breathes." She looked up at me then, and her eyes were wrong. Too dark, too deep, as if I was staring down into the earth itself through her sockets. "Marin, stop it. You're scaring me." "I can feel it, Jack. The whole forest, every root, every tree. 50,000 trees, all one organism. And it's hungry. It's been hungry for so long." I grabbed her arms and hauled her to her feet. She came willingly but limp, like a puppet. We stumbled forward, and I was half dragging her when we saw the RV again. Impossible. We'd been walking away from it. But there it was, waiting in the clearing. Roots even thicker now, completely engulfing the lower half of the vehicle. The white bark of nearby aspens had begun to grow over the RV's sides, slowly consuming it. "We're never leaving," Marin said calmly. "Don't you see? It won't let us. Shut up. Just shut up and help me think." But she was right, and I knew it. Whatever this place was, whatever Pando was, it had claimed us. We were inside something vast and ancient, and it didn't want to let go. Night was falling. How was that possible? We'd left the RV in the morning, but the sun was setting now, shadows stretching long between the trees. The breathing beneath us grew deeper, slower, as if the forest was settling into sleep. And when night came fully, we heard the voices. They emerged from the ground, from the trees, from the very air. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all whispering, pleading, crying. I recognized some of the voices. My mother, dead 3 years. Marin's brother, who'd drowned when we were in college. People I'd known. People I'd lost. "Jack," my mother's voice called from somewhere in the darkness. "Jack, baby, I've been waiting for you." "Don't listen," I said, more to myself than to Marin. But Marin was listening. She'd turned toward the trees, her head cocked, a small smile on her face. "My brother's here," she said softly. "He wants to show me something." "Marin, no." She walked into the forest before I could stop her. I lunged after her, but the roots on the ground had grown thick, and they tangled around my ankles, holding me fast. I watched her disappear into the darkness between the aspens, her white shirt visible for a moment longer, then gone. Marin, no answer. Just the voices, still calling, still pleading, mixed now with that child's laughter we'd heard earlier. I fought against the roots, tearing at them with my hands. They were warm to the touch, pulsing faintly with that same steady breathing. In my panic, I pulled my pocket knife and started sawing at them. They bled. Not sap, blood. Red, human blood that smelled like copper and earth. I dropped the knife and fell backward, hyperventilating. The roots released me suddenly, recoiling like I'd burned them. I didn't hesitate. I ran into the forest after Marin, following the sound of her brother's voice, which seemed to be leading her deeper and deeper into the trees. The aspens were so thick now, I had to turn sideways to squeeze between them. Bark scraped my face and hands. The breathing grew louder, more labored, and I realized with mounting horror that I was descending. The ground sloped downward, and with each step, I sank a little deeper into the soft, pulsing earth. I found Marin in a hollow, a depression in the ground surrounded by ancient aspens whose trunks had fused together, creating a cathedral-like space. She stood in the center, her hands raised, and she was singing. I didn't recognize the song, but it was old, the kind of melody that feels like it's always existed. "Marin, we have to go." She turned to me, and her face was radiant, ecstatic. "Can't you feel it, Jack? We're part of it now. Part of Pando. Part of something bigger than ourselves. You're not making sense. You're not—" I stopped because I saw what was behind her. In the center of the hollow, the ground had split open, not like a crack, like a mouth. And inside that mouth was darkness, but not empty darkness. Darkness full of things. Pale things that writhed and reached and whispered. Roots. Thousands upon thousands of roots, all moving, all alive, all breathing in unison. "It wants us to join," Marin said. 50,000 trees, Jack, all connected. We could be connected too. Never alone again. Never separate. She stepped backward, toward the mouth in the earth. "Marin, stop!" I lunged for her, catching her arm just as she tipped backward. The roots in the darkness surged upward, wrapping around her legs, her waist, pulling her down. She didn't fight them. She was smiling. "Let go, Jack," she said gently. "It's okay. It doesn't hurt." But I didn't let go. I pulled with everything I had, even as more roots emerged and began wrapping around me too. They were cold and dry, like dead skin, but they moved with horrible purpose, searching for openings in my clothes, trying to burrow into my flesh. I felt one slide into my boot, felt it probe against my ankle. The sensation was violating, intimate in a way that made me scream. I kicked wildly and felt the root tear free, taking a strip of skin with it. The pain shocked me into action. I wrapped both arms around Maren and pulled, ignoring her protests, ignoring the roots tearing at both of us. The ground breathed in, trying to suck us down, but I leaned back with all my weight. For a terrible moment, we hung suspended. Maren half in the mouth of darkness, me pulling her out, the roots pulling her in. Then something gave way with a wet, ripping sound, and we fell backward together, tumbling up the slope. Maren screamed, the first genuine sound of pain I'd heard from her. I looked down and saw why. Some of the roots had been torn free, but others remained, burrowed into her legs, pulsing beneath her skin like parasites. "Get them out," she sobbed. "Jack, get them out." I tried. God, I tried. But they were too deep, fused somehow with her muscle and bone. When I pulled on one, she screamed so loudly that I thought she'd pass out. The root stretched but didn't break, as if it had grown into her circulatory system, become part of her. "I can't," I said, crying now too. "Maren, I can't. We need to get to a hospital. It's still pulling," she gasped. "I can feel it pulling me back." She was right. The roots in her legs were contracting slowly, rhythmically, trying to drag her back toward that mouth in the earth. And Maren was changing. Her skin had taken on a papery quality, like birch bark. Her eyes had darkened, becoming the same deep black as the knots on the aspens. "Jack," she whispered, "you have to leave me." "No. I'm already part of it, but you're not. Not yet. Run. I won't leave you." But even as I said it, I knew I would. I could feel it in my bones. The survival instinct overriding everything else. The roots in Maren's legs contracted again, and she slid back an inch, then two. She was being reeled in like a fish on a line. "Go," she said. And then, with terrible clarity, "Please, Jack, don't let it have you too." I ran. I hate myself for it. I'll hate myself for it until the day I die. But I ran, leaving Maren in that hollow, being slowly pulled back into the earth by roots that had grown inside her body. Her screams followed me, then faded, then stopped altogether. I don't remember much of what happened next. I ran blindly through the aspens, falling and rising and falling again. The ground breathed beneath me, trying to trip me, but I kept moving. At some point, I realized blood was streaming down my leg where a root had torn free, leaving a ragged wound. Dawn came. Impossible, but it came. I saw light through the trees and ran toward it, and suddenly I was out. Out of the forest, standing on a paved road, gasping and bleeding and alone. A pickup truck stopped. An elderly rancher got out, took one look at me, and called 911. I told the police everything. The breathing ground, the cairns, the roots, Maren being pulled into the earth. They listened politely and sent search parties into Fish Lake National Forest. They found our RV exactly where we'd left it, completely normal, no roots, no damage. They found no hollow, no mouth in the earth, no trace of Maren except her backpack, which was sitting neatly beside the RV, zipped closed. They searched for 3 days before calling it off. The official ruling was that Maren had wandered off and gotten lost in the vast forest, that I'd had some kind of psychotic break from stress and dehydration. They found the wounds on my leg, deep gouges that looked like I'd scraped against rocks or branches. No one believed me about the roots. I tried going back once, 2 weeks later, with a documentary filmmaker who'd heard my story and thought it would make good content. We hiked into the same area, following GPS coordinates I'd saved. We found nothing unusual, just a beautiful aspen forest, peaceful and still. The ground was solid beneath our feet. No breathing, no voices, no cairns. But I noticed something the filmmaker didn't. The aspens in that area had dark knots on their trunks, and if you looked at them from the right angle, they almost looked like faces. One of them, in particular, had knots arranged in a pattern that could have been a woman's face, mouth open in a scream. The skin on that trunk had a texture that reminded me of Marin's cheek. I moved to Arizona after that. Somewhere with no trees, just open desert where you can see for miles in every direction. I still have nightmares about the hollow, about the roots writhing in the darkness, about Marin's face as she disappeared into the earth. But the worst part, the part that keeps me awake at night, is this. I can still feel it sometimes. Late at night, when I'm trying to fall asleep, I feel the floor beneath my bed breathing. In and out, in and out. The slow, patient respiration of something vast and hungry. And I wonder if leaving Marin behind was enough. If my escape satisfied whatever lived beneath Pando's roots, or if it's still waiting, still hungry, still pulling me back through some invisible root that burrowed into me while I wasn't paying attention. I wonder if I'm still connected. Sometimes I dream I'm back in that forest, walking between the white-barked trees, and I can hear Marin calling my name, her voice echoing from beneath the ground. In these dreams, I kneel down and press my ear to the dirt, and I can hear her whispering from somewhere deep below. We're all connected, Jack. All of us. There's no escape. And when I wake up, I taste soil in my mouth, and my fingernails are full of dirt, and I know with terrible certainty that one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe years from now, I'll walk out my front door and find myself standing in an aspen forest. White trunks stretching in every direction, the ground breathing beneath my feet. And this time, there will be no running, because the roots are already inside me, thin and white and patient, growing through my veins, connecting me to something vast and hungry that's been waiting for me to stop fighting and come home. The dirt road to Fish Lake National Forest ended at my own car, after all. It always was, it always will be, because every road I take leads back there to that breathing forest, and I'm so tired of running. Story 3. My name is Harper. I'm 32. The flowers at Fish Lake National Forest turned their heads to follow me. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw them move. Not sway in the wind. There was no wind that morning, but pivot on their stems like tiny heads tracking my path through the aspen grove. But I was so focused on getting away from Derek, from the apartment that still smelled like his cologne and lies, that I barely registered the wrongness of it. The RV I'd rented was a 23-foot Winnebago that handled like a drunk elephant, but it was mine for 2 weeks, and Fish Lake was supposed to be the perfect place to clear my head. 3 million acres of wilderness in south-central Utah, famous for Pando, the massive clonal colony of quaking aspens that was actually a single organism, the heaviest living thing on Earth. I'd read about it in a magazine during one of those sleepless nights after I'd found Derek's text to her, whoever she was. The article called Pando, Ancient, Resilient, Interconnected, everything I wasn't. So I packed up my life, or what was left of it, and drove 12 hours from Boulder to lose myself in something bigger than my failures. The campground host, an elderly man named Carl with fingers stained dark from tobacco, had directed me to a spot off Forest Road U66, about 3 miles from the main campground. "Quieter back there," he'd said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Most folks don't like being too far from the bathrooms, but you seem like someone who needs the solitude." He wasn't wrong. I'd given him cash for a week and drove deeper into the forest than I'd planned, following a rutted path that barely qualified as a road. That's when I first noticed the flowers. They lined both sides of the path. Columbines and Indian paintbrush, lupines and glacier lilies, a riot of color that seemed impossible for late September. Their blooms should have been long dead, replaced by seed heads and withered stems. But here they were, vibrant and lush, and as the RV rolled past, I swear I saw them turn. All of them. Hundreds of flower heads swiveling in unison to watch me pass. I told myself it was exhaustion, that I'd been driving too long and seeing things. I parked in a clearing surrounded by aspens, their white bark glowing in the afternoon light, and spent the rest of the day setting up camp and trying not to think about Derek. The RV's generator hummed to life on the 3rd try. I had propane, water, a full tank of gas. My phone showed no signal, but that was expected. I'd brought books, my laptop, enough food for 10 days. I was prepared for solitude. What I wasn't prepared for was the garden. I found it on my second morning, following what looked like a deer trail that wound through the aspens. The trees here were massive, their trunks wider than my arms could span, and they grew so densely that the forest floor was dim even at noon. The trail opened suddenly into a circular clearing perhaps 50 feet across, and in its center was a garden that had no business existing. It was formal, structured, rows of flowers planted with geometric precision, paths of white stones forming intricate patterns, a wooden arbor thick with climbing roses that bloomed blood red despite the season. At the clearing's center stood a sundial, its bronze face green with age. The whole thing looked like it had been transplanted from an English manor and dropped into the Utah wilderness by some impossible hand. The flowers watched me approach. I know how that sounds. I'm a graphic designer, not prone to flights of fancy. I believe in things I can see, touch, measure. But those flowers moved. As I stepped into the clearing, every bloom, roses, dahlias, chrysanthemums, dozens of varieties I couldn't name, turned toward me in a wave, like spectators at a tennis match following the ball. The movement was subtle but unmistakable, and it sent ice sliding down my spine. I should have left. Should have turned around and driven the 12 hours back to Boulder, back to my empty apartment and the pieces of my ruined life. Instead, I stepped closer to the sundial, drawn by morbid curiosity and the strange beauty of the impossible garden. The sundial's face was inscribed with words, worn but legible. As the flower turns to sun, so too shall she return. My grandmother used to say that kind of thing. Cryptic phrases that sounded profound but meant nothing. I ran my fingers over the bronze, feeling the grooves of the letters, and that's when I heard it, whispering, soft as breath, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Not words exactly, but sounds that wanted to be words, that pressed against the edges of meaning without quite breaking through. I spun around, expecting to see someone, a hiker, a ranger, anyone. But the clearing was empty except for the flowers, and they were all facing me now. Hundreds of colorful heads tilted at exactly the same angle. "Hello." My voice cracked the silence like breaking glass. The whispering stopped. The flowers didn't move. I backed away slowly, not turning my back on the garden until I reached the tree line. Then I ran, stumbling over roots and rocks, branches whipping my face until I burst into my campsite gasping and shaking. The RV sat exactly where I'd left it, mundane and solid and real. I locked myself inside and didn't come out until the next morning. I should have left then, too. But there's something about fear that hooks into you, that makes you need to understand it before you can escape it. That's what I told myself anyway. The truth was probably simpler. I had nowhere else to go. Derek had our apartment, our friends, the life we'd built. All I had was a rented RV and 2 weeks of escape before I had to face reality. So I stayed. On the third day, I woke to find flowers growing around my RV. Not just a few wildflowers, dozens of plants that hadn't been there the night before, sprouting in a perfect circle around my campsite. Columbines and paintbrush, lupines and lilies, the same varieties from the garden. Their blooms faced inward, toward the RV, like they were keeping watch. I took photos with my phone, even though I had no signal to send them anywhere. In the viewfinder, the flowers looked normal enough. Just plants doing what plants do. But when I lowered the phone, I saw them move. A columbine swayed left. A paintbrush tilted right. They were communicating somehow, passing signals through the circle like a living telegraph. That's when I noticed the pattern they formed. Not random growth, but deliberate placement. The flowers outlined a shape, crude but recognizable. A woman, arms outstretched, head tilted back. The image was rough, impressionistic, but unmistakable once I saw it. I was looking at myself. My hands shook as I climbed into the RV and started the engine. Time to go. Past time. But when I put the transmission in reverse, the RV lurched and died. I tried again. Nothing. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch, and a smell like burning flowers filled the cab. I popped the hood and found the engine compartment packed with vegetation. Vines threaded through the belts, roots wrapped around the battery terminals, flowers blooming from impossible crevices in the metal. It would have taken days for plants to grow like this naturally, but I'd checked the engine the previous afternoon, and it had been fine. "What the fuck?" I whispered, and the flowers around the RV rustled in response, though there was still no wind. I tried my phone again, no signal. Tried the RV's radio, static. I had no way to call for help, no way to drive out. The nearest campground was 3 miles through the forest, and the idea of walking through those aspens with the flowers watching filled me with a dread I couldn't name. So I did what any rational person would do. I went back to the garden. This time I brought my camera, a bottle of water, and a hammer from the RV's toolkit. The hammer made me feel stupid. What was I going to do? Threaten the flowers? But holding it calmed something in my lizard brain that had started screaming for weapons. The garden looked different in the late afternoon light. The flowers had all changed position, facing east now instead of tracking me, and new varieties had appeared overnight. Black roses climbed the arbor. Purple irises ringed the sundial. Everything was bigger, lusher, like the garden was swelling with some unseen vitality. The whispering started the moment I entered the clearing. Louder this time, almost intelligible. I caught fragments that might have been words. Turn, return, she, turn. The sound seemed to come from the flowers themselves, vibrating through their stems and petals, a chorus of vegetable voices that made my teeth ache. I approached the sundial with the hammer raised like a weapon, which was ridiculous, but it made me feel better. The bronze face gleamed in the slanting light, and I saw something I'd missed before. A gap between the sundial's face and its base, like a hidden compartment. I wedged the hammer's claw into the gap and pried. The face lifted with a grinding sound, and beneath it was a cavity filled with paper. Not paper, pages, torn from a journal, crammed into the space until they formed a compressed mass. I pulled them out carefully, my hands trembling, and saw they were covered in handwriting. A woman's script, neat at first, growing increasingly erratic. The first page was dated June 3rd, 1987. Found the most beautiful garden today, it read. Just stumbled across it while hiking. It shouldn't be here, too formal, too well-maintained, but it's gorgeous, like something from a dream. The flowers watch you. Sounds crazy writing that, but I swear they do. They turn their heads and watch. My mouth went dry. I flipped through more pages. The entries spanned several weeks. The writer, who signed herself as M. Suhero, returning to the garden again and again despite her growing unease. She described the whispering, the way the flowers grew, how they seemed to anticipate her visits, blooming in patterns that spelled her name, her thoughts, her secrets. July 15th, 1987. The flowers know about James, know what he did. They show me pictures made of petals, him with her, them together. How can flowers know? How can they care? But they whisper his name like an accusation. They whisper mine like a promise. July 22nd, 1987. I think the garden wants me. No, I know it does. The flowers lean toward me when I come near. When I try to leave, they grow across the path. Today, a rose brushed my arm and left a thorn embedded in my skin. When I pulled it out, it had tiny roots. July 28th, 1987. James came looking for me. The garden didn't let him leave. I watched the flowers grew over him while he screamed. Covered his mouth, his nose. He clawed at them, but they just grew faster. It took hours. The garden is beautiful now, so much bigger. I think it fed on him. I think it's feeding on me too, but slower. I can feel tendrils in my chest. The last entry was dated August 2nd, 1987. The garden whispers my name in his voice now. Says I'm part of it, part of the soil and roots and blooming things. Says I'll turn like flowers turn to the sun. Says I'll return. I don't want to return. I don't want to. The writing dissolved into illegible scrawls. I dropped the pages like they were burning. Around me, the flowers had all turned to face the sundial, and, by extension, me. Hundreds of blooms pointed in my direction like accusing fingers, and the whispering grew louder, more insistent. Turn, Harper, turn and return, turn and return. They knew my name. No, I said aloud. No, I'm leaving. I'm getting out of here. But when I tried to move, I found I couldn't. My feet were rooted to the ground, literally rooted. I looked down and saw thin green shoots emerging from my hiking boots, threading through the leather and into my skin. They didn't hurt, but I could feel them growing, spreading through my feet like cracks in concrete. I screamed and swung the hammer, smashing at my own boots, at the shoots, at anything. The vines broke but grew back faster, thicker. Around me, the flowers surged closer, their stems elongating impossibly, reaching. A black rose brushed my cheek, an iris wrapped around my wrist. The whispering became a roar of voices all saying the same thing. Turn, turn, turn. I don't remember how I got free. There's a gap in my memory, a blank space filled with the smell of crushed petals and the feeling of tearing. When I came back to myself, I was running through the forest, blood streaming from a dozen scratches, my boots shredded but my feet blessedly free of roots. I made it back to the RV as night fell. The circle of flowers around my campsite had grown inward, closing the gap by several feet. If I waited another day, they'd reach the RV itself. I tried the engine again with no hope, and to my shock, it turned over. The flowers in the engine compartment were gone, leaving behind only a smell like decay. I didn't question it. I put the RV in gear and drove, following the rutted path by the glow of my headlights, flowers blurring past on both sides. They were everywhere now, lining the road in impossible profusion, and all of them turned to watch me pass. The path seemed longer than I remembered, winding through aspens that leaned in overhead until I felt like I was driving through a tunnel of white trunks and watching blooms. It took 3 hours to reach the paved road. 3 hours when it should have taken 20 minutes. When I finally burst out onto Highway 25, I sobbed with relief and didn't stop driving until I reached Richfield, 40 miles away. I paid for a motel room and spent the night cataloging my injuries. The scratches were superficial, already scabbing over. But when I examined my feet, I found something that made my breath catch. Thin, white lines beneath my skin, spreading from where the roots had been. They looked like plant veins, like I was developing chlorophyll in my blood. I told the ER doctor in Richfield that I'd had an allergic reaction to something in the forest. He gave me antihistamines and antibiotics, told me the lines would fade, that I'd be fine. But they didn't fade. 2 weeks later, back in Boulder, they were still there. A network of white beneath my skin that spread a little further each day. And the flowers started growing in my apartment. First, just a few sprouts in the corners, in the cracks where wall met floor. Then more, climbing the walls, sprouting from the carpet. I pulled them up, used poison, bleached the floors. They grew back overnight. Now they cover my bathroom, my bedroom. They're in the kitchen sink, growing from the drain. The landlord thinks I'm crazy, that I'm planting them myself for some reason. I've stopped trying to explain. The worst part is the whispering. It's faint, but constant. Coming from the flowers, yes, but also from inside me, from the white lines in my skin, from whatever the garden planted that's growing in my blood. It says my name, says I'm turning, says I'll return. I've tried to research it. Fish Lake, the garden, M. Harrow. I found a missing person report from 1987. Melissa Harrow, 34, last seen hiking in Fish Lake National Forest. Never found. The report included a photo. She looked like me. Not identical, but similar enough to be my sister. Same dark hair, same build, same desperate eyes. I think the garden is old. I think it's been there for a very long time, feeding on people like Melissa, like me. I think it plants something in the women it catches. Something that grows and spreads until they can't help but return, until they become part of the garden themselves. The white lines reached my chest last week. I can feel them branching through my ribs, wrapping around my heart. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see green in my eyes. When I cry, my tears smell like pollen. I'm going back. I don't want to, but I can't stop myself. The pull is too strong, like gravity, like falling. The flowers in my apartment bloom in patterns now. My name, my face, the shape of a sundial. They whisper directions. They show me the way. As the flower turns to sun, so too shall she return. I'm writing this down so someone will know. So when they find my car in the parking area off Forest Road E066, they'll understand what happened. The garden is patient. It waits. It plants its seeds in lonely women who come seeking solace, and it grows them from the inside out until they're more plant than person. The white lines reached my throat this morning. I can taste chlorophyll. My fingers are stiff, turning woody. In the mirror, my skin has taken on a faint green cast. Tomorrow I drive. In a week, I'll be part of the garden, another voice in the chorus, another bloom watching for the next visitor. We'll whisper your name. We'll show you beautiful things. We'll plant our seeds in your blood, and you'll turn. You'll turn like flowers turn to the sun. You'll turn and return. The garden is waiting. Story 4. I'm Andrew. I'm 34. The cave at Ape Cave, Washington, sang my lullaby. I hadn't heard that song in 27 years. Not since my mother died when I was 7. Her voice raspy from the pneumonia that would take her 3 days later. She'd sung it to me every night before that. A Hungarian melody her own mother had brought from the old country. Words I never understood but felt deep in my bones. And now, standing at the entrance to the longest lava tube in the continental United States, I heard it again, perfect and clear, echoing from somewhere in that absolute darkness. My hand froze on the RV door. We'd parked in the lot near the lower entrance, the only vehicle there on a Tuesday in late September. The forest pressed close, ancient Douglas firs and western hemlocks creating a cathedral of shadow even in mid-afternoon. My girlfriend Sarah was inside making sandwiches. My dog Copper, a rust-colored mutt with one floppy ear, sat beside me, his body gone rigid. "You hear that?" I whispered to him. He whined, low and uncertain. Sarah appeared in the doorway, turkey sandwich in hand. Hear what? The singing had stopped. Just whined through the trees now, and the distant sound of the Lewis River. Nothing. Just nothing. She studied my face with those sharp green eyes that had first caught me 2 years ago at a coffee shop in Portland. Sarah was practical, skeptical, with a scientist's need for evidence. She worked as a lab technician and approached life like a series of experiments to be conducted and measured. It's what I loved about her. It's what would make everything that followed so much harder. "You okay?" she asked. "You look pale." "I'm fine. Just excited to explore, I guess." She smiled and tossed me the sandwich. "Eat first, then we'll go caving. I brought the good flashlights and extra batteries. It's supposed to be over 2 miles of tunnels down there." We'd planned this trip for months, a week-long RV journey through southern Washington, hiking and exploring. Ape Cave had been my idea. I'd read about it online, seen photos of the otherworldly lava formations, the sense of being inside the earth itself. What I hadn't mentioned to Sarah was that my mother had talked about caves all through that final week. Delirious with fever, she'd described walking through tunnels of black stone, hearing music echoing from chambers that went down forever. The doctors said it was the infection affecting her brain. I'd been 7. I'd believed them. Now, I wasn't so sure. We ate our sandwiches in the RV, Copper begging at our feet. The interior was cozy. A rental we'd picked up in Seattle, wood-paneled walls and a small kitchenette. A bed that folded down from the ceiling. Through the window I could see the cave entrance, a dark mouth in the hillside surrounded by interpretive signs and a metal gate that was supposed to be locked but hung slightly ajar. "Looks like we're not the first ones to break in," Sarah said, noticing my gaze. "The gate's open." "It shouldn't be. The ranger station said the lower cave was closed for the season." "Well, we drove 4 hours to get here. I'm not turning back now." She stood and started gathering our gear. Flashlights, rope, Water bottles, a first aid kit. Sarah was nothing if not prepared. Besides, we're both adults. We know how to be safe. I didn't argue. Part of me wanted to leave, to drive back to Portland and forget the singing I'd heard. But a larger part needed to go down there. Needed to know if I'd imagined it, or if something was waiting in that darkness. Something that had been waiting for 27 years. We left Copper in the RV with water and his bed. He barked as we walked away, which he never did. Sarah laughed it off, but I felt his eyes on my back, urgent and afraid. The forest was quieter than it should have been. No birds, no squirrels chattering in the branches. Just the whisper of wind and our footsteps on the trail. The cave entrance grew larger as we approached, and I felt a coldness emanating from it that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the cold of absence, of negative space, like standing at the edge of something that wanted to pull you in. The gate's lock had been cut cleanly, recently from the brightness of the metal. Vandals, Sarah said, but her voice carried less certainty than her words. We clicked on our flashlights and stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately, a good 20 degrees. Our breath misted in the beam of the lights. The cave was tall here, maybe 15 feet, with rough black walls that looked like frozen waves. Lava flow, I reminded myself. Just ancient volcanic rock. Nothing sinister about geology. But the air smelled wrong. Not musty or mineral like caves usually smell, but sweet and rotten at the same time, like flowers left too long in a vase. God, what is that stench? Sarah covered her nose. Probably a dead animal, deer or something. We moved forward, our lights casting weird shadows on the undulating walls. The cave descended gradually, the floor littered with chunks of collapsed rock. I'd read that Ape Cave was formed 2,000 years ago when Mount St. Helens erupted, and lava carved this tunnel through the earth. Walking through it felt like being inside a vein, something organic and alive despite the stone. We'd gone maybe 200 yards when I heard it again. The lullaby, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere ahead, echoing through the tunnels in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint the source. My mother's voice, exactly as I remembered it, singing those Hungarian words that sounded like water over rocks. I stopped walking. Andrew? Sarah had gotten a few paces ahead. She turned back, her flashlight catching my face. You really don't hear that? Hear what? Singing. A woman singing. She listened, head tilted. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the drip of water somewhere in the darkness. I don't hear anything. Maybe it's echo from outside, or wind through the rocks? That's not wind. Okay, well, I don't hear it. She softened her tone. Are you sure you're all right? You've been acting strange since we got here. I wanted to tell her about my mother, about the cave dreams, about the feeling that I'd been meant to come here all along. But the words stuck in my throat. Sarah dealt in facts and evidence. What I felt was neither. Let's keep going, I said. The tunnel branched ahead, splitting into two passages. Sarah consulted the crude map she'd downloaded on her phone. No signal down here, but she'd saved the file. Left goes to the upper cave. Right goes deeper into the lower section. Lower section is supposed to be more impressive. Let's go right. Something in my voice made her look at me sharply, but she nodded and we took the right-hand passage. The walls closed in here, the ceiling lowering until we had to duck. Our flashlights seemed weaker somehow, the beams not penetrating as far into the darkness. The sweet, rotten smell grew stronger. I tried breathing through my mouth, but I could taste it, cloying and thick. Sarah stumbled, catching herself against the wall. Christ, what was... Her light had fallen on something. A pile of clothes discarded against the cave wall. A jacket, jeans, hiking boots still laced, all arranged neatly, folded, like someone had laid them out to dry. What the hell? Sarah knelt beside them, careful not to touch. These look recent. The jacket's still... She lifted a corner with her flashlight. Still damp. My chest tightened. The clothes were my size, my style. Blue jacket, dark jeans, brown boots almost identical to the ones I was wearing. We should go back, I said. We should definitely go back, Sarah agreed. This is weird. Someone might need help. They might be hurt, or... Or they took their clothes off and walked into the darkness, I thought, but didn't say. Because that's what people did in caves sometimes, when the hypothermia got bad enough, when their brains started misfiring. They undressed and wandered off to die. But these clothes weren't scattered. They were arranged. Sarah was already backing toward the entrance, her scientific composure cracking. We need to tell someone. The rangers. The police. Someone. I started to follow her, but the singing came again. Louder now. Impossibly loud, filling the tunnel from all directions. And this time, there were words I could understand, mixed with the Hungarian. Andrew, come down to me. Andrew, the stairs go deep, so deep, down to where mothers sleep, where mothers keep their promises. You hear it now? I grabbed Sarah's arm. Tell me you hear it now. Her eyes were wide, reflecting my flashlight back at me. There's something, like humming? Or, she shook her head violently. No, that's just echo. Or bats. Bats make sounds, right? That's not bats. Then what is it, Andrew? What is that? I didn't have an answer. The singing continued, and beneath it I heard other sounds now. Footsteps coming from deeper in the cave. Slow, deliberate footsteps, and with them a dragging sound, like something being pulled across stone. Run, I said. We ran, our flashlights bouncing wildly, our breathing harsh and panicked. The tunnel seemed longer than it had been. The walls pressed closer. I could hear the footsteps behind us, keeping pace, never gaining but never falling behind. And over it all, that singing, my mother's voice twisted into something that couldn't be her, couldn't be human. Each note perfectly sustained and deeply wrong. We burst out into the main passage, turned toward the entrance, and stopped. The way was blocked, not by a cave-in or fallen rocks, by a figure. It stood directly in our path, maybe 50 feet away, caught in the edge of our flashlight beams. At first I thought it was a person. Tall, thin, wrapped in dark clothing. But as my light steadied, I saw that it wasn't clothing at all. Its skin was black and cracked like lava rock, and its limbs were too long, joints bending in too many places. Its head was the worst part. Smooth, featureless, except for a mouth that hung open in a perfect O. And from that mouth came the singing, my mother's lullaby. Each word formed without tongue or throat. Just that gaping hole producing sound that shouldn't exist. Sarah made a noise I'd never heard from her before. Something animal and raw. She grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my palm. The thing took a step toward us. Its joints clicked and scraped. The other tunnel? I hissed. The left fork. We scrambled backward, never taking our lights off the figure. It didn't pursue, just stood there singing, its voice echoing through the cave system until it seemed like 1,000 mothers were calling their children home. We ran down the left passage, the one that led to the upper cave. The tunnel rose steeply here, the floor treacherous with loose rock. Sarah slipped and went down hard, her flashlight skittering away into the darkness. She cried out, not in pain, but in pure terror, because without the light we could hear things moving all around us, scraping and clicking, the sound of joints that bent wrong. I hauled her up, shared my light with her. Come on, come on. The tunnel opened into a chamber, maybe 30 feet across. Our lights swept over walls covered in strange formations. Not the usual stalactites and stalagmites, but shapes that looked almost intentional. Like sculptures, like figures frozen in the moment of reaching out. Oh, God, Sarah whispered. Oh, God, Andrew, look. She was shining her recovered flashlight at the far wall. At first I couldn't process what I was seeing. Then it resolved into clarity and my stomach dropped. Writing. Hundreds of names carved into the black stone, some shallow and fresh, others worn deep by time, and dates, some going back decades, all stopping at the same place, the day they'd entered the cave. I found mine halfway up the wall, carved in letters 3 inches high. Andrew Morrison, September 24th, 2024. Today's date. That's not possible, Sarah said, but her voice was faint, losing conviction. Someone's messing with us. This is some kind of sick joke. But her name was there too, right next to mine. The singing had stopped. The silence was somehow worse. I could feel presences in the dark beyond our lights, watching, waiting. The air had grown thick, hard to breathe, and that sweet rotten smell was overwhelming now. "Sarah," I said quietly, "when we get out of here, when we get out, I need you to listen to me about something. My mother, before she died," a sound cut me off. Footsteps again, but now coming from multiple directions. From the tunnel we'd entered. From passages we hadn't noticed in the walls. From above, somehow, from the ceiling itself, the clicking and scraping of too many joints, figures emerged into the edge of our light. Dozens of them. All with that same cracked lava skin, those two long limbs, those featureless heads with gaping mouths. And from each mouth came a different voice. Men, women, children, all singing different songs, all overlapping into a cacophony that drove needles into my brain. One of them had my mother's voice. One of them, I was sure, was my mother. Whatever she'd become in the 27 years since her death, whatever had been waiting in this place for me to finally arrive. "There has to be another way out," Sarah said, spinning in circles, her light jerking across the walls. "Caves always have multiple openings. We just have to—" She stopped. Her light had fallen on a passage I hadn't noticed before, narrow and low, almost hidden behind a rock formation. But there was air moving through it. I could feel it on my face, a draft that might mean an exit. "There," I said. We ran for it as the figures closed in. I felt something brush my shoulder, hard and cold, and heard the snap of jaws closing on empty air where my head had been a moment before. Sarah squeezed into the passage first. I followed, scraping my shoulders on the rough stone, the space so tight I had to exhale to fit through. Behind us, the figures gathered at the opening. They didn't follow. Just stood there, their songs forming words now, coherent and terrible. "Stay with us. Sleep with us. We've been so alone, so long, alone. Your names are already written. Your places are prepared. Stay, stay, stay." The passage climbed steeply upward. We crawled on our bellies, our flashlights held forward, the stone scraping our backs. I could hear Sarah sobbing as she climbed, but she didn't stop moving. My own breath came in ragged gasps. Every muscle screamed. The air grew fresher, colder, and I dared to hope we were heading toward the surface. We emerged into another chamber, larger than the last. Sarah pulled herself out first and helped me up. We stood there for a moment, bent double, gasping. Then she shined her light around the room and screamed. Bodies, dozens of them, maybe more. Some so old they were barely skeletons. Others fresher, clothes still intact. All arranged in neat rows like they were sleeping. Like they'd simply laid down to rest and never woken up. No, 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 no. Sarah was shaking her head, her light jerking wildly across the scene. "This isn't real. We're hallucinating. Carbon monoxide or cave gases or..." But I'd recognized one of the bodies. Near the front, still mostly flesh despite the decay. Wearing the clothes we'd found in the tunnel. Wearing my face, it was me. Older, maybe 50 or 60, but unmistakably me. Same scar on the chin from when I fell off my bike at age 10. Same crooked index finger I'd broken in college. Dead for what looked like weeks, laid out carefully with his hands folded on his chest. "Sarah," I said, and my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "I think we need to understand something. I think we've been here before." "What are you talking about? We just got here this morning." "No. I mean, yes, but also..." How could I explain what I was feeling? The certainty growing in my chest. Time doesn't work right here. The cave doesn't work right. Those voices, they're not singing to us. They're singing to who we're going to become. And those bodies... Stop it. Just stop. Sarah grabbed my jacket, pulled me close. Her eyes were wild. "We are getting out of here right now. We are going to find an exit and call for help and never come back. Understand?" I nodded, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Because I'd heard the singing before I'd entered the cave. Because my mother had described these tunnels 27 years ago. because my name had been carved on the wall with today's date, and my older self was dead on the floor with the others who'd gotten lost in this place where past and future and present all collapsed into darkness and song. We found another passage leading upward. This one had wooden stairs, ancient and rotting, installed by some long-ago park service before they'd closed this section of the cave. We climbed carefully, testing each step, praying they wouldn't collapse beneath our weight. The singing started again, closer now. Not just from behind us, but from ahead, from inside the very rock, like the cave itself was the instrument producing these sounds. I recognized more voices now. My father, who'd never sung a note in his life. My grandmother, friends from childhood, all calling me down, down, deeper into the earth where they'd been waiting, where they'd always be waiting. "Almost there," Sarah said, and I could hear the desperate hope in her voice. "I can see light. Andrew, I can see daylight." She was right. A faint glow ahead, gray and beautiful. We climbed faster, the stairs creaking ominously. 10 more steps. 5. We emerged into twilight. Not the cave entrance where we'd started. We were somewhere else, somewhere higher on the mountain, surrounded by old-growth forest I didn't recognize. The air was wrong. Too cold, too still. And the light was fading fast, the sun already below the horizon, even though it had been early afternoon when we'd entered. "Where are we?" Sarah turned in circles, her phone out, trying to get a signal. "This isn't... The parking lot should be right there. The RV should be..." The RV. Copper. Oh God, Copper had been in the RV. "We have to go back," I said. "Are you insane? We barely got out alive." "My dog is there, and our stuff. And, Sarah, think about it. How long were we underground? How did it get dark so fast?" She stared at her phone, at the time display that didn't make sense. 8:47 p.m., nearly 6 hours since we'd entered the cave. "That's impossible," she said. But we both knew that word had lost its meaning. We tried to find our way back through the forest, but the trees all looked the same, and the trails, when we found them, didn't appear on Sarah's downloaded map. We walked for what felt like hours, our flashlights growing dimmer, until we finally admitted we were lost. Sarah broke down then, sitting on a fallen log and putting her head in her hands. "This can't be happening. We're rational people. We work in the real world. There has to be an explanation." I sat beside her, exhausted and terrified, but also feeling something else. Something like acceptance. My mother told me about caves. At the end, when she was dying. She said she'd been inside the earth, walking through tunnels of black stone. She said there were people there, singing people, and they'd made her promise to send me when I was older. When I was ready. Sarah lifted her head. "What?" I didn't remember until now. I'd blocked it out, I guess. Thought it was just fever dreams. But she made me promise. And then she died, and I forgot. But somewhere deep down, I always knew I'd end up here eventually. "That's insane, Andrew. Promises to dying relatives don't work that way. In caves like this, they do. Don't you see? Time isn't linear here. We saw our own names carved before we'd written them. We saw my body from the future. This place, it's not bound by normal rules. And my mother, she somehow got in and got out, but she left something behind. Some part of herself. And it's been calling me back ever since." Sarah stood abruptly. "No, I don't accept that. There's a rational explanation. We're disoriented. Maybe we inhaled some kind of gas down there that's making us hallucinate. Maybe we're still in the cave and this is all a dream. But I'm not. I refuse to believe in monsters and time loops and..." She stopped. We both heard it. Copper barking. Distant but unmistakable, his sharp yapping bark echoing through the trees. "The RV," Sarah said. "He's in the RV. We can follow the sound." We ran through the darkening forest, following Copper's barks. The trees seemed to move in the corners of our vision, repositioning themselves, but we didn't look too closely. We just ran, crashing through underbrush, our lights almost dead now. We burst into a clearing. The RV was there, but wrong. It was sinking. The ground around it had gone soft, muddy, and the vehicle was tilting backward, its rear wheels already submerged in earth that churned and bubbled like boiling water. Copper was inside, visible through the window, barking frantically, his paws up on the glass. "No!" Sarah ran forward, but I grabbed her. "Wait, look at the ground." The earth around the RV wasn't just soft. It was moving, pulsing, covered in those same cracks and patterns as the skin of the things in the cave. The parking lot had been transformed into something organic, something alive, and it was pulling the RV down into itself. Copper's barking grew more frantic. He could see us now, his eyes locked on mine, pleading. I let go of Sarah and ran for the RV door. The ground felt spongy under my feet, wrong, like running on flesh. I yanked the door open, it was unlocked, hanging at a weird angle, and lunged inside. Copper leaped into my arms, 40 pounds of terrified dog. I turned to run back out. The door slammed shut, not by wind. It closed deliberately, and I heard the lock click, a sound that shouldn't have been possible since the RV didn't have automatic locks. Through the window, I could see Sarah trying to get in, pulling at the handle, screaming something I couldn't hear. The RV lurched backward another foot, the angle steeper now. Things slid off the counter, our lunch dishes, Sarah's bag, my jacket. Copper whined and burrowed into my chest. The singing started again. But this time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from below, from under the RV, from deep in the earth that was swallowing us. A chorus of voices, hundreds of them. All the people who'd been taken by the cave over the years, all singing together. And I understood then what they wanted, what they'd always wanted. Not to kill, not exactly. To preserve, to keep, to add to their collection of lost souls, trapped in a place where time didn't move forward or backward but simply existed. All at once, forever. My mother had escaped. Somehow. But she'd promised them something in return. A substitute. A replacement. Me. And she'd spent 27 years in the ground, in whatever state of existence this place demanded, waiting for me to honor her bargain. The RV tipped further. I fell backward, lost my grip on Copper. He scrambled up the sloping floor toward the front seats, barking at the windshield where the ground was rising like a wave. Sarah was there, pressed against the glass from outside, her face a mask of terror. She was screaming my name, over and over, and I could read her lips. "I'll get help. I'll get help." But we both knew there was no help. Not from this. The singing reached a crescendo. The walls of the RV began to crack, black fissures spreading across the metal like the cave invading the world above. Through the cracks, I could see them. The figures, the lava-skinned singers, reaching in with their 2 long fingers. One of them had my mother's face, or what remained of it. Enough for me to recognize her, even twisted by whatever this place had done to her. She looked at me through the cracking wall, and her mouth formed words in time with the singing, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry, but a promise is a promise." The RV went under. The earth swallowed it whole, Sarah's screaming face disappearing as the ground closed over us like water. I felt us falling through darkness, through soil that moved like liquid, through layers of rock and time. Copper was howling, I was screaming, and all around us the figures sang. We fell for hours, or seconds, or years, and then we stopped. I was standing in a chamber I recognized, the one with the names on the wall, the one with the bodies arranged in rows, but it was different now. Emptier. The bodies were gone, the names were fading like they'd never been carved. Copper pressed against my leg, silent now, his body rigid. And I realized we weren't at the end. We were at the beginning. The singing had stopped. The figures were gone. Just me and my dog in a cave chamber at the bottom of the world. And somewhere far above, Sarah was screaming for help that would never come. Because time wasn't linear here. We'd fallen backward, or forward, or sideways. We'd fallen outside of time entirely, into a space where the cave could reach forward and backward, claiming its victims across years and decades all at once. My mother had walked out of here. She'd made it to the surface, met my father, had me, lived 7 more years before the cave's poison finally killed her, but she'd left a part of herself behind. and that part had been growing, gathering others, building a collection of souls to keep it company in the dark. I looked at the wall where my name had been carved. It was blank stone now, waiting to be written, and I understood what I had to do, what Sarah would have to do. I found a sharp rock and began to carve. Andrew Morrison, September 24th, 2024. My hands shook. Copper whined, and from somewhere far away, or far ahead, I heard Sarah calling my name, her voice echoing through tunnels that wouldn't exist for hours or years or never. I finished carving and dropped the rock. My name glowed on the wall, fresh and deep. A promise kept. A price paid. A place held for as long as the cave desired. Behind me, I heard movement. The figures were returning, drawn by the completion of the contract. They surrounded me in the darkness, their mouths opening to sing. But the sound that came out wasn't frightening anymore. It was almost gentle, almost welcoming. My mother's voice rose above the others. Now you rest. Now you sing with us. Now you're home. Copper growled low in his throat. I held him tight and closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was standing at the cave entrance. The sun was just setting, painting the forest in shades of amber and rust. Sarah was beside me, checking her gear, smiling at something I couldn't remember saying. Copper sat at my feet, tail wagging. "Ready?" Sarah asked. "Yeah," I heard myself say. "Let's go explore." We walked into the cave. The gate hung open, its lock freshly cut, and from deep in the darkness I heard singing. A woman's voice, singing a Hungarian lullaby I'd known all my life. I recognized it, remembered it, knew what waited at the bottom of those black stone stairs. But my feet kept walking forward, because in Ape Cave, time didn't move in straight lines. It moved in loops and circles, in promises kept and debts paid. And somewhere in the dark, my name was already carved on the wall, dated for today, waiting for me to find it and understand what I'd always known. That I'd been here before, that I'd be here again, that the cave echoes voices from the future, and mine was already singing. Story 5. My name is Samuel. I'm 34. The lake at Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness rose higher when I approached. I should have known better than to bring my RV into northern Minnesota in late September. The park's officials at the ranger station outside Ely had given me a strange look when I'd mentioned camping near Fall Lake, just outside the official wilderness boundary where motorized vehicles were still permitted. The woman behind the counter, her name tag read Deb, had paused mid-sentence while filling out my permit. "You're going alone?" she'd asked. "Just me and some fishing gear," I'd replied, forcing a smile. I didn't mention that I was running from a failed marriage, a career that had imploded spectacularly, or the fact that I hadn't slept properly in 4 months. The wilderness seemed like the right place to reset, to find some quiet where I could hear myself think again. Deb had slid the permit across the counter slowly. "Stay on the marked trails if you hike, and don't go near the water after dark." "Why not?" She'd looked at me for a long moment, her weathered face unreadable. Just don't. That had been 3 days ago. Now, as I stood at the edge of Fall Lake watching the sun descend behind the pines, I understood that something was fundamentally wrong with this place. The water had been 50 feet from my RV when I'd parked that first afternoon. This morning, it had been 30 feet away. Now, as the light bled from the sky in shades of amber and rust, the waterline was less than 15 feet from my front tire. The lake was rising. Not gradually, not with the slow accumulation of rainfall or snowmelt. It was rising deliberately, purposefully, as if the water itself had decided to come closer. I tried to tell myself it was an optical illusion, some trick of the light or the terrain. But I'd placed rocks as markers, and the water had swallowed them one by one throughout the day. Each time I checked, the lake had crept forward another few feet, silent and patient. The sun touched the horizon, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many minutes. I retreated inside the RV, locking the door behind me even though I knew how ridiculous that was. What good was a lock against water? I'd chosen this spot specifically because it was isolated. a small clearing surrounded by dense boreal forest, accessible only by a barely maintained service road that had rattled every bolt in my 15-year-old Winnebago. The nearest campsite was miles away. I'd wanted solitude, and I'd gotten it in abundance. Now that solitude pressed against the windows like something tangible. I heated a can of soup on the propane stove and tried to focus on the normalcy of the task. The blue flame, the smell of chicken broth, the mundane act of stirring. But my eyes kept drifting to the small window above the sink, watching the lake's surface catch the last rays of sunlight. That's when I saw them. Bones. They emerged from the water like pale flowers blooming in fast motion. First, a few scattered pieces near the shore, then more, dozens of them, arranging themselves on the narrow beach between the forest and the lake. I watched, my spoon frozen halfway to my mouth, as the bones shifted and moved, dragging themselves across the wet sand. They were forming a pattern. I set down the soup and pressed my face against the window, my breath fogging the glass. The bones, ribs, vertebrae, long femurs, smaller pieces I couldn't identify, were arranging themselves into shapes. No, not shapes. Letters. Samuel. My name. The spoon clattered into the sink. I stumbled backward, my hip striking the small dining table, sending my road atlas sliding to the floor. The bones had spelled my name. The bones knew who I was. I forced myself to breathe, to think rationally. Someone was messing with me. Had to be. Maybe Deb from the ranger station had mentioned to someone that a guy named Samuel was camping out here alone, and some locals had decided to have a laugh at the tourists' expense. Sick bastards. But even as I tried to convince myself, I knew it was wrong. I'd watched those bones move on their own. I'd seen them drag themselves across the sand with nothing visible propelling them. The light was almost gone now. I grabbed my flashlight and stood by the door, my hand on the handle. Part of me knew that going outside was the worst possible decision. The smart thing would be to get in the driver's seat, start the engine, and drive the hell out of here, even if it meant navigating that terrible service road in the dark. But I'd spent the last 4 months of my life being smart, being cautious, watching my marriage dissolve because I'd been too afraid to fight for it, accepting the termination of my teaching position because fighting back seemed too hard. I was tired of running from things I didn't understand. I opened the door. The cold hit me first, far colder than it had any right to be for September. My breath plumed out in front of me and I could see frost forming on the RV's side mirror. The temperature had to have dropped 40 degrees in the past 10 minutes. The bones were still there, still arranged in my name, each piece gleaming pale in the twilight. I approached slowly, the flashlight beam wavering as my hand trembled. Up close, I could see they were old, stained dark by years underwater, covered in patches of algae and sediment. As I stood there, more bones emerged from the lake. They rose from the water without splash or sound, dripping and ancient, and began adding to the arrangement. I watched, paralyzed, as they formed new letters after my name. Samuelcomehome. Samuel, come home. This isn't real, I whispered. This isn't happening. The bones rearranged themselves. Yourehome. I ran. I didn't make a conscious decision to move. My body simply took over, propelling me back toward the RV. I slammed the door and locked it, then locked the screen door too, as if that flimsy barrier would make any difference. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack bone. Through the window I could see the bone letters gleaming in the moonlight. More bones were emerging now, hundreds of them, creating elaborate patterns on the beach, spirals and circles, geometric designs that hurt to look at, angles that seemed to bend in ways that defied physics. I grabbed my phone. No signal. There hadn't been since I'd left the main road. The RV's radio picked up nothing but static on every channel. I was completely cut off. The rational part of my mind was screaming at me to leave, but when I looked toward the driver's seat, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Water was seeping under the door. Not much, just a thin trickle, but it was flowing uphill, defying gravity, creeping across the floor toward me. The lake was coming inside. I jumped onto the bed in the back of the RV, pulling my feet up. The water continued to spread, covering the floor in a thin, dark sheet. It smelled of rot and old vegetation, of things long dead and forgotten. As I watched, small objects began to surface in the water: stones, pieces of wood, and more bones. Small bones this time, the kind that might belong to birds or squirrels. They arranged themselves on the flooded floor, forming words: WEVEBEENWAITING. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What do you want?" The bones shifted. YOUKNOW. But I didn't know. I'd never been to Boundary Waters before. I'd chosen this place randomly, pointing at a map while sitting in a McDonald's parking lot in Duluth, deciding I needed to go somewhere remote, somewhere I could think. The water was ankle-deep now, and rising. I could feel the RV settling slightly, as if the lake was lifting it. Through the windows I could see the water level outside had risen dramatically. It was lapping at the bottom of the door, just inches from breaching the seal. That's when I heard the sound. It started as a low hum, barely audible over the blood pounding in my ears. Then it grew, swelling into something that might have been music, might have been voices, might have been the sound of water moving through underground caves. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the lake, from the forest, from beneath the RV itself. And then I heard my name, Samuel. It was my mother's voice. She'd been dead for 6 years, a victim of pancreatic cancer that had taken her in 4 brutal months. But that was her voice, unmistakable, calling to me from somewhere outside the RV. "Samuel, honey, come out here." "No," I whispered. "You're not real. You're not her. I've been waiting for you. We all have." I looked out the window and saw her standing on the beach, right in the center of the bone arrangements. She looked exactly as she had before the cancer, healthy and whole, wearing the blue cardigan I'd buried her in. She was smiling, her arms open. "Don't you want to see me again?" Every fiber of my being screamed that this was wrong, that whatever was out there wearing my mother's face was an abomination. But another part of me, the part that still grieved, that had spent 6 years wishing for one more conversation, one more hug, that part wanted desperately to believe. I found myself standing, the water now mid-calf, cold as ice. My hand reached for the door. Then I saw her eyes. They reflected the moonlight wrong, gleaming like an animal's. Too bright, too empty. And when she smiled, her mouth opened too wide, revealing row after row of teeth that spiraled back into darkness. I jerked my hand away from the door and scrambled back onto the bed. The thing that looked like my mother cocked its head at an unnatural angle. "Samuel," it said, and now there were more voices layered underneath, speaking in unison. "You can't leave. You're home now. You'll always be home." The water surged higher, and I heard a crack. The RV tilted violently to one side, throwing me against the wall. Something underneath had given way, and we were sinking. The lake was pulling the RV down. Water gushed through a seam in the floor, then another. Within seconds, it was knee-deep and rising fast. I grabbed the emergency axe from its mount on the wall and swung it at the roof, the thin aluminum giving way after 3 strikes. Cold night air rushed in, along with that horrible humming sound. Louder now, almost deafening. I pulled myself through the hole onto the roof of the RV. The vehicle was nose down in the water, the back end sticking up at a 45-degree angle. All around me, the lake stretched out, impossibly vast, as if it had swallowed the entire forest. The shore was nowhere to be seen. Except it hadn't swallowed the forest. Looking more carefully, I could see trees rising from the water, their trunks disappearing into the depths. The lake had risen to engulf everything, had somehow grown to cover acres in minutes. The thing that looked like my mother was standing on top of the water 20 feet away, perfectly balanced on the surface. Around her, other figures were rising, humanoid shapes made of water and lake vegetation, skeletons held together by algae and mud, things that might once have been human but were now something else entirely. "The lake remembers," my mother thing said. "Every person who drowned here, every child who fell through the ice, every soul the water claimed. We're all part of it now, and you belong here, Samuel. You've always belonged here." "I've never been here before," I screamed. "Haven't you?" And then I remembered. It came back in a flash so vivid I nearly fell off the RV's roof. I was 7 years old, on a camping trip with my parents. We'd come to Boundary Waters, stayed at Fall Lake. I'd wandered away from camp despite my mother's warnings, had walked down to the water's edge in the dark. Something had called to me, a voice that sounded like singing, like laughter, like home. I'd waded into the water. I'd walked deeper, the cold lake rising to my chest, my shoulders, my chin. I'd wanted to keep going, to see what was calling me from the depths. My mother had found me, had dragged me back, screaming and kicking. I'd cried for hours afterward, begging to go back to the water, saying it had promised me things, beautiful things. My parents had left the next morning and never spoke of it again, and I'd forgotten, or I'd been made to forget. "The lake never forgets," the thing said. "It marked you, it claimed you, and now it's time to come home." The water figures were moving closer, walking across the surface toward me. I could see faces in them, human faces, distorted and wrong, mouths open in silent screams or laughter, I couldn't tell which. The bones on the beach had multiplied, thousands of them now, forming elaborate patterns that sprawled across the flooded landscape, and I realized with horror that they were spelling out names. Hundreds of names. Thousands. All the people the lake had claimed. And at the end, still being formed by fresh bones emerging from the depths, was my name. The RV lurched again, sinking deeper. Water was pouring through the hole in the roof now. I had maybe seconds before it went under completely. I looked toward where the shore should be, but there was nothing except water and those terrible walking figures. Then, at the very edge of my vision, I saw a light. A small, flickering light that might have been a campfire. Without thinking, I dove. The water was so cold it drove the air from my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't tell which way was up. Things touched me in the darkness. Hands or weeds, I couldn't tell. Grasping, pulling. The humming was louder under the water, vibrating through my bones, and I could hear words in it now. Promises of peace, of belonging, of finally being home. I kicked hard, fighting against the pull, against the voice that told me to just breathe in, to let the water fill my lungs, to join them. My head broke the surface and I gasped, choking, swimming toward that distant light with everything I had. The water fought me. It became thick, viscous, like the swimming through gelatin. Each stroke took monumental effort. Behind me, I could hear splashing, could hear my mother's voice calling my name, could hear 100 other voices joining her. "Samuel, come back, come home, come home, come home." But I kept swimming. My muscles burned, my lungs screamed. The cold was seeping into my core, making my limbs heavy and uncoordinated. I went under once, twice, swallowing mouthfuls of foul water each time. The light was getting closer, but so were the voices. Something grabbed my ankle. I kicked frantically, connecting with something solid, something that felt like bone wrapped in slime. It let go, but others took its place, hands and claws and things without name, all pulling me down. I was going under again, the surface receding above me, the light fading. This was it. This was where I'd die, pulled down into the darkness by things that had once been human, that wanted me to join them in their eternal drowning. Then I felt solid ground under my feet. I stood up, gasping, and found myself in waist-deep water near a shoreline. The light I'd been swimming toward was a campfire burning on a small beach. Beyond it, I could see the dark line of trees, real trees, rooted in earth, not submerged phantoms. I staggered forward, each step an agony, until I collapsed on dry land. The fire crackled nearby, blessedly warm. I lay there, coughing up lake water, my entire body shaking. "You made it." I jerked my head up. An old man sat by the fire, so still I hadn't noticed him. He was Native American, his long gray hair pulled back, his face a map of deep wrinkles. He wore a heavy canvas jacket and regarded me with dark, knowing eyes. What is this place?" I managed. "The boundary," he said simply, "where the lake's influence ends." For now. The lake, it tried to kill me. There were things in it, things that looked like, I know what's in it. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night. My people have known for generations. This place is old, older than the trees, older than the rocks. The Anishinaabe have stories about it. Different tribes have different names, but it's all the same thing. A place where the boundary between the living and the dead grows thin. Those things in the water, drowned souls. They can't leave. The lake won't let them. And it's always hungry for more. He looked at me directly. You were here before, weren't you? When you were young. I nodded weakly. How did you know? Because that's how it works. It marks you when you're vulnerable, plants a seed and waits. Could be years, could be decades, but eventually something draws you back. And when you come back, he gestured toward the water. It collects. I followed his gaze and saw that the lake had receded. It was back to its normal boundaries, peaceful and still under the moonlight. The shore where my RV had been was visible again, though the vehicle itself was gone, pulled down into whatever depths lurked beneath that placid surface. Why? I asked. Why does it do this? Because it's hungry. Because it's lonely. Because that's what it is. He shrugged. Does a predator need a reason to hunt? I sat up slowly, my clothes soaked, my body still trembling. How do I make sure that it doesn't call me back? You can't. His words hit me like a physical blow. You're marked. You'll always be marked. But now you know what you're fighting. That's something. The bones, I said, remembering. They spelled names. There were so many. Hundreds of years of drownings. The lake remembers them all. Arranges their bones like trophies. He threw another stick on the fire. You should go. Dawn's coming, and you want to be far from here when the sun rises. What happens at dawn? He didn't answer, just stared into the flames. I stood on shaking legs. Thank you. For the fire. I didn't know how to finish. Don't thank me yet, he said. You survived tonight, but the lake is patient. It'll call again. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not for years, but it'll call. And every time you'll have to be strong enough to resist. How do you resist something like that? By remembering what you're fighting for. By staying away from water when you can. By never, ever coming back to this place. He finally looked up at me. And by understanding that some of those drowned souls, they chose it. They heard the call, and they went willingly. The lake promises things. Peace, belonging, an end to pain. It'll offer you those things too. I thought about my mother. About the divorce papers sitting unsigned in my apartment, about the termination letter from the school board, about all the ways I'd been drowning long before I ever came to Boundary Waters. I won't come back, I said. Good. He turned back to the fire. There's a logging road 1/2 mile north. Follow the shore until you see the marker, a cairn of white stones. The road will take you back to civilization. Don't stop walking until you're off this land. I started to leave, then turned back. What's your name? Names have power here, he said, especially after dark. Go. I went. The walk took 3 hours. 3 hours of stumbling through darkness, of jumping at every sound, of seeing movement in every shadow. The cairn was where he said it would be, and the logging road was rough but passable. I walked it until my feet bled, until the sky began to lighten in the east, until I finally reached a paved highway. A trucker picked me up, a woman hauling paper products to Duluth. She took one look at my bedraggled state and handed me a blanket without asking questions. I called the ranger station from her cell phone and reported my RV stolen, gave them a fake story about waking up to find it gone. Deb's voice on the other end of the line was knowing, sad, but she took the report without comment. I made it back to Minneapolis 2 days later, signed the divorce papers, started applying for new jobs, tried to rebuild a life from the wreckage. But I still hear it sometimes, especially at night when I'm alone. A humming, distant and faint, that might be water moving through pipes, might be traffic on the highway, might be something else entirely. And on those nights, I dream of a lake rising, of bones arranging themselves into letters, of cold water filling my lungs while voices whisper promises of peace. The old man was right. The lake is patient, and I'm marked. I live in a third-floor apartment now, as far from ground level as I can manage. I shower quickly, never filling the bathtub. I won't go near any body of water larger than a puddle. Friends think I'm paranoid. My therapist thinks I'm dealing with PTSD from the stolen RV incident. But sometimes when I'm washing dishes or brushing my teeth, I see things in the water. Faces, bones, letters forming my name. And I know with absolute certainty that one day the call will be too strong to resist. One day I'll find myself driving north, pulled by something older and hungrier than anything that should exist in this world. One day the lake will collect what it marked 27 years ago. I just hope I'm strong enough when that day comes to remember this night. To remember the cold and the terror and the feeling of hands pulling me down. To remember that what the lake offers, peace, belonging, an end to pain, comes at a price too terrible to pay, because the lake never forgets. And the bones are still waiting, down in the dark, to spell my name one final time. Story 6. My name is Samuel. I'm 34. The lake at Caddo Lake State Park rose higher when I approached. I remember thinking how still everything was when we first arrived. The kind of stillness that makes you aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat. My wife, Jessica, and I had driven our Winnebago all the way from Dallas, looking for a long weekend away from the fluorescent buzz of our office jobs. We'd been married 3 years, and lately our conversations had shrunk to logistics. Whose turn to buy groceries, when the car payment was due. This trip was supposed to fix something between us that neither of us could name. Caddo Lake sprawled before us like a reflection of the sky, broken only by the ancient cypress trees that rose from the water like the fingers of drowning giants. Spanish moss hung from every branch, swaying in a breeze I couldn't feel on my skin. The ranger at the entrance had been a woman in her 60s with sun-damaged skin and eyes that lingered too long on our faces when she handed us the park map. "Y'all picked a quiet time," she'd said, her accent thick as the humidity. "Most folks avoid this spot this time of year." "Why's that?" Jessica had asked from the passenger seat. The ranger's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Lake acts strange in October. Water levels fluctuate. Sometimes things that should stay buried come up." I'd laughed it off as local color, the kind of spooky talk meant to entertain tourists. Now, I wish I'd asked what she meant. We set up camp in Site 17, a clearing surrounded by towering pines and within view of the lake's edge. The RV's generator hummed to life, and Jessica started unpacking our supplies while I checked the leveling jacks. Everything mechanical worked fine. It was the natural world that felt off. The lake was perhaps 50 yards from our site, its surface dark as crude oil despite the afternoon sun. As I walked toward it to get a better look, I noticed something odd. With each step I took closer to the shore, the waterline crept up the muddy bank. Not dramatically, just an inch or two, but enough that I stopped walking to make sure I wasn't imagining it. I stood still, watching. The water held its new position. I took another step forward. The lake rose another inch, lapping gently at roots that had been dry moments before. "Sam," Jessica called from the RV. "Can you help me with the awning?" I turned back, telling myself I'd been seeing things, trick of the light. Uneven ground creating an optical illusion. When I glanced over my shoulder, the waterline looked normal again. That first evening passed normally enough. We grilled chicken on the camp stove while the sun sank behind the cypress forest, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. Jessica seemed more relaxed than she'd been in months, her laugh coming easier as we shared a bottle of wine. We talked about real things, her frustration with her boss, my anxiety about my father's failing health, the quiet terror we both felt about whether we'd ever be ready to have kids. "I'm glad we did this," she said, reaching across the picnic table to squeeze my hand. Her fingers were warm, and I squeezed back, feeling like maybe we could find our way back to each other after all. The screaming started at 2:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I grabbed my phone when the sound jolted me awake, my heart already pounding. It was a child's scream, high and terrified, coming from somewhere near the water. Jessica sat up beside me, her face pale in the darkness. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. "I don't know. Stay here." I pulled on my jeans and grabbed the heavy mag light we kept by the door. The RV's windows showed only darkness outside, and when I opened the door, the October air hit me like a cold hand. The screaming had stopped, but now I could hear something else. A wet, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled through mud. "I'm coming with you," Jessica said, already dressed. I didn't argue. We moved toward the lake, our flashlight beams cutting weak path through the dark. The dragging sound grew louder, accompanied now by a rhythmic splashing. When we reached the shore, my light found the source. The water had risen at least 3 feet since sunset. Trees that had stood on dry ground now had their roots submerged, and the lake was still climbing, inch by inch, up the muddy bank. But that wasn't the worst part. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see shapes moving just beneath the surface. Pale, writhing things that almost looked like hands reaching upward. "We need to move the RV," Jessica said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hand as she gripped my arm. "If the water keeps rising..." The child screamed again, closer this time. We both spun around, flashlight seeking the source. There, at the edge of our campsite, stood a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, wearing a dirty white nightgown that hung to her bare feet. Her hair was plastered to her skull, dripping water that pooled around her toes. "Sweetie," Jessica said, already moving toward her. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The girl didn't respond. She just stared at us with eyes that reflected our flashlight beams like an animal's. When Jessica got within 10 feet, the girl smiled, and I saw that her teeth were wrong. Too many of them, crowding her mouth at odd angles. "Jess, stop," I said, but she'd already frozen. The girl tilted her head at an angle that made my stomach lurch. "The lake wants to show you something," she said in a voice too deep for her small frame. "It's been waiting so long to show someone." Then she turned and walked back toward the water with unnatural, gliding steps. Jessica and I stood paralyzed, watching as the girl reached the lake's edge and kept walking. The water didn't splash around her legs. It opened for her, pulling back like a curtain, and she descended into the exposed mud beneath as if walking downstairs. The water closed over her head without a ripple. "What the fuck?" Jessica breathed. "What the fuck was that?" We ran back to the RV, our flashlights jerking wildly as we moved. I fired up the engine while Jessica pulled in the awning and disconnected the water line. The generator coughed and died, and in the sudden silence I heard that wet, dragging sound again, much closer now. "Sam, drive," Jessica said, climbing into the passenger seat. I threw the RV into reverse, not bothering to retract the leveling jacks properly. Metal shrieked against rock as we lurched backward, and through the rear-view mirror I saw them. Dozens of pale figures emerging from the lake, walking with that same gliding motion. They wore clothes from different eras. Rotted dresses from the 1800s, moldering suits from the 1920s, torn jeans and t-shirts from last decade. All of them dripping, all of them smiling those wrong smiles. The RV's wheels spun in the soft earth before finding purchase. We shot backward onto the main camp road, and I cranked the wheel, bringing us around. The headlights swept across the advancing figures, and I saw their faces clearly for the first time. They were bloated, waterlogged, skin sloughing off in places to reveal the darkness underneath. But they moved with purpose, reaching toward us with fingers that were too long, too thin. "Go, go, go!" Jessica screamed. I floored it, the RV's engine roaring as we barreled down the narrow camp road. Behind us, I could hear splashing, the sound of many feet running through water that shouldn't have been there. The road should have been dry, but my headlights showed water covering the asphalt, rising steadily as we drove. "The exit," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We just need to reach the exit." But when we rounded the bend where the ranger station should have been, we found only more lake. The water had swallowed the road entirely, stretching out in all directions like we were on an island that was shrinking by the second. "That's impossible," Jessica said. "The lake isn't this big. It can't be this big." I turned the RV around, heading back the way we'd come, but that road was underwater too. In the span of 10 minutes, Caddo Lake had expanded to surround us completely. Through the windshield, I could see the pale figures standing in the shallows, waiting. There has to be high ground, I said, studying the map on my phone, but the GPS showed us in the middle of the lake, miles from any shore. This isn't real. This can't be real. Jessica's phone rang, making us both jump. She looked at the screen, her face going even paler. It's my mom, but I don't have signal out here. Don't answer it, I said. She answered it anyway, putting it on speaker. At first, there was only static, then a wet, gurgling sound, then a voice that might have been her mother's but distorted, stretched, like it was speaking from underwater. Jessica, honey, why don't you come swimming? The water's fine. It's been waiting for you. It knows your name. Jessica threw the phone across the RV. Drive anywhere. Just drive. I chose a direction at random, plowing through water that had risen to cover the road completely. The RV's engine sputtered, unhappy with the conditions, but kept going. Around us, the cypress trees loomed like sentinels, their Spanish moss hanging so low it brushed against our roof. That's when we found the other campers. Their site was on slightly higher ground, just enough to keep their tent above water. A man and woman in their 50s stood outside, packing their gear with frantic movements. They looked up as our headlights hit them, relief flooding their faces. "Thank God," the man shouted, wading toward us. "We thought we were alone out here. The water, it just keeps rising. Our car's already flooded out." I rolled down my window. "Get in. We're getting out of here." They didn't need to be told twice. The woman, she introduced herself as Linda, was crying as she climbed into the RV. Her husband, Robert, kept looking back at their half-packed campsite. "We need to leave everything," I said. "Now." "But Robert started. "Now," Jessica said, and something in her voice made him stop arguing. With 4 of us, the RV felt more secure somehow, like maybe this was just a weird natural phenomenon we could escape with enough determination. Robert was a retired engineer, and he started talking about unprecedented flooding, about how climate change was making weather patterns unpredictable. I wanted to believe him. I wanted this to be something rational. Then Linda screamed. She was looking out the back window, and when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw why. The little girl in the white nightgown stood in the middle of the road behind us, water swirling around her waist. But she wasn't alone anymore. Next to her stood 24 more children, all soaked, all wrong, all smiling those terrible smiles. "Don't stop," Robert said. "Whatever you do, don't stop." I wasn't planning to. I pushed the RV faster, water spraying up around us. The vehicle wasn't meant for this. It was top-heavy, designed for paved roads and level campgrounds. I felt it sway dangerously as we hit a submerged rut. "There," Jessica pointed ahead. "Is that lights?" She was right. Through the trees, I could see electric lights, warm and yellow. Another campsite, or maybe a ranger building. Somewhere dry, somewhere safe. I aimed the RV toward it, hope surging in my chest. We broke through a line of trees and found ourselves in a clearing. A small cabin stood in the center, lights blazing from every window. An old pickup truck was parked out front, and smoke rose from the chimney. It looked like something from a postcard, impossibly normal in the midst of this nightmare. "Someone's home," Linda said. "They'll have a phone, a radio. They can call for help." I parked the RV and we piled out, splashing through ankle-deep water to reach the cabin's porch. The front door stood slightly ajar, inviting. Robert knocked, calling out, "Hello, we need help. There's been flooding." No answer. He pushed the door open wider, and we stepped inside. The cabin's interior was warm and dry, furnished with handmade furniture and oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on the walls. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. On the dining table sat 4 plates of food: fried fish, cornbread, collard greens, still steaming as if they'd just been served. "Hello?" Jessica called out. "Is anyone here?" I noticed the photographs on the mantel then. Black and white images of people in old-fashioned clothing, standing in front of this very cabin, but the dates written beneath them made my blood run cold. 1874, 1891, 1903, all the way up to 1956, then nothing more recent. "We should go," I said. "This isn't right." But Robert had found something in the kitchen, a journal, leather-bound and water-stained. He brought it into the living room, reading aloud by the firelight. October 12th, 1956. The lake has been calling to us for 3 weeks now. We hear it at night, whispering our names, telling us about the things that live in the deep water, the things that were here before the lake was made, when this was just swampland and Spanish moss. They've been waiting so long, they say, waiting for the water to rise high enough to take back what was stolen from them. Stop reading that, Linda said, her voice shaking. Robert continued. We can see them now when we look at the water. The drowned ones, the taken ones, everyone the lake has ever claimed. They're not dead. They've just changed, become part of something older. And tonight, the lake says it's ready to rise, to reclaim everything. We've left this journal for whoever comes after, but we know no one will believe it. The lake always wins. The lake always rises. The lights went out all at once, plunging us into darkness broken only by the fireplace. And in that firelight I saw them. The drowned figures standing in the cabin's doorway, water pouring from their clothes and mouths. The little girl stood at the front, still smiling. The lake showed you, she said in that too deep voice. Now you have to choose. Join us in the water, become part of what rises, or stay dry and watch everyone you love drown. We ran. There was no thought to it, just pure animal terror driving us back toward the RV. Behind us, I could hear them coming, not running, but gliding with that horrible smooth movement. The water had risen to our knees now, making every step a struggle. Jessica fell, splashing face first into the dark water. I grabbed her, hauling her up, but her eyes had changed. They were wider, darker, like they were reflecting something I couldn't see. Sam, she said, and her voice had an echo to it, as if she was speaking from the bottom of a well. Sam, I can hear them. They're so old. They've been here since before the first people, since before the land had names, and they're so hungry. Fight it, I said, dragging her toward the RV. Whatever it is, fight it. Robert and Linda had already reached the vehicle, pulling open the door. We splashed toward them, Jessica moving slower now, her head turning back toward the cabin, toward the water, toward the advancing figures. They just want company, she said dreamily. They've been alone so long. We could stay with them. It wouldn't hurt. The water is warm, Sam. So warm. I shoved her into the RV and jumped into the driver's seat. The engine turned over once, twice, then caught. Water poured in through the floor vents now, and I could feel the RV settling lower, the weight of accumulated water dragging us down. Which way? Linda shouted. Which way do we go? Every direction looked the same. Dark water, trees, more water. No roads, no landmarks, nothing but the rising lake. I chose randomly, praying I was heading away from the cabin, away from whatever the hell we'd found there. Behind us, Jessica had started humming. It was a melody I didn't recognize, something old and rhythmic like a nursery rhyme. Robert and Linda were staring at her, their faces pale. Jessica, I said, keeping my eyes on the flooded landscape ahead. Stay with me. We're getting out of this. But why? She asked, and when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw water running from her eyes like tears. Why fight it? The lake has room for everyone. The lake loves us. It wants to keep us. The RV's engine sputtered. We were moving through water that was now waist deep, far too deep for any vehicle to manage. I could feel us slowing, the tires losing their grip on whatever lay beneath. No, 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 I muttered, pumping the gas. Come on, come on. That's when Robert grabbed my shoulder from behind, his grip painfully tight. Stop the vehicle, he said, and his voice had that same underwater quality Jessica's had taken on. We need to go back. Linda wants to go swimming. I looked at Linda. She was smiling, water running from her mouth, soaking her shirt. The lake told me something wonderful, she said. It told me about my daughter, the one we lost. She's been in the water all this time, waiting for us. She's 10 years old forever, and she misses us. Robert, I said carefully. Linda, this isn't real. Whatever you're hearing, it's not real. But it is, Jessica said from behind me, and I felt her cold, wet hand on the back of my neck. It's more real than anything else. The lake has been here for thousands of years. We've only been here for minutes. Which one do you think matters more? The engine died completely. We sat in the dark RV, water rising around our ankles, while 3 people I'd thought I knew looked at me with strangers' eyes. Sam, Jessica whispered, leaning close. Her breath smelled like stagnant water and rotting vegetation. Sam, don't you want to see what's under the surface? Don't you want to know what the lake has been hiding? No, I said, my hand finding the door handle. I really don't. I threw myself out of the RV and into the water, which had risen to my chest. The cold hit me like an electric shock, clearing my head. Behind me, I heard the RV's door slide open and the splash of bodies entering the water. I didn't look back. I just swam, picking a direction at random and swimming with everything I had. The water fought me. It pulled at my legs, dragged at my arms, tried to suck me under with every stroke. I could hear them behind me. Jessica, Robert, Linda, calling my name, begging me to come back, to join them, to stop fighting and accept what the lake was offering. It doesn't hurt, Jessica called. I promise it doesn't hurt. We can be together, Sam. Forever. My foot touched something solid. The ground was rising, becoming shallower. I forced myself forward, half swimming, half crawling, until I could stand. The water was at my waist, then my knees, then my ankles. I looked back once. The RV was gone, swallowed completely. But I could see shapes moving in the water. Dozens of them now, hundreds maybe, all the drowned souls the lake had claimed over the centuries. And among them, 3 new figures standing in water up to their necks, their faces turned up toward the sky like flowers seeking the sun. One of them was Jessica. She saw me looking and smiled that terrible smile, water running from her lips. "The lake will call you back," she said, and somehow I could hear her clearly despite the distance. It always does. You can run to the city, hide in your buildings of steel and glass, but the water is everywhere, Sam. In your pipes, in your lungs, in every cell of your body. And when it rains, you'll remember. You'll hear us calling. And someday, you'll answer. I turned and ran through the shallows, splashing toward higher ground. The cypress trees thinned, and suddenly I was in a parking lot. The real entrance to Caddo Lake State Park. The ranger station stood dark and empty, but beyond it, I could see the highway, the blessed normalcy of passing headlights. I ran to the road and flagged down the first car I saw. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, stopped immediately when he saw me soaked and wild-eyed. "Jesus, are you okay? What happened?" "Flooding," I gasped. "Caddo Lake. There are people still in there. You have to call 911. You have to—" But when I turned to point back at the park entrance, I saw only darkness and the regular boundaries of the lake. Peaceful and still in the moonlight. No risen water. No flooded forest. Just a normal state park on a quiet October night. "Son," the driver said gently, "there hasn't been any flooding. Been a dry season, actually. Lake's lower than usual." They found the RV 3 days later, parked at our campsite exactly where we'd left it. Everything was inside. Our clothes, our food, Jessica's purse with her ID and credit cards. The investigators said it looked like we'd just walked away from the vehicle for a short hike and never came back. They searched for weeks. Helicopters, boats, dogs, dive teams. They found nothing. No bodies, no trace. The official report said 3 people had likely drowned and been swept away by underwater currents. They closed the case after 6 months. I live in downtown Dallas now, in a high-rise apartment far from any natural body of water. I shower at the gym because I can't stand to be in my bathroom when the water runs. When it rains, I hear them calling, Jessica's voice mixed with hundreds of others, all of them whispering my name, reminding me that water is everywhere, that I can never really escape. Last week, I woke up with my pillow soaked, not with sweat or drool, but with lake water. I could smell it, that distinctive smell of Caddo Lake, of Spanish moss and cypress and things rotting beneath the surface. And when I turned on the light, I found a child's handprint on my wall, dripping and wet. The lake is patient. The lake is old. And the lake never forgets. I tell myself I won't go back. that I'll stay in my steel and concrete tower, surrounded by the artificial and the man-made. But sometimes, late at night, I find myself looking up directions to Caddo Lake State Park. My finger hovers over the search button, trembling. Because part of me, a part that grows louder every day, wants to know what Jessica saw under the water, what made her smile that way, what the lake was offering that seemed worth drowning for. The water is everywhere. In my coffee, in my tears, in the rain that streams down my windows. And in every drop, I hear them calling. Come back, Sam. Come see what we've seen. Come down where it's quiet and dark and nothing ever hurts anymore. I don't sleep much anymore. And when I do, I dream of walking into still water, of feeling it close over my head, of opening my mouth and letting the lake rush in. In these dreams, it doesn't hurt. It feels like coming home. I tell myself I won't answer the call. I tell myself every morning that I'll stay dry, stay safe, stay sane. But the lake is patient. And I am so tired of fighting.